Long before the sun warmed the earth, before the rivers sang across the land, there was a stillness that stretched beneath all things. In the spaces that lay between mountains and valleys, between the fluttering clouds and the quiet sea, there existed a realm that few spoke of aloud. It was a place of soft shadows and gentle echoes, a place where the air carried a strange, comforting hush. This was the beginning of Hades' world, a realm that would one day hold countless whispers, footsteps, and the tender weight of lives past and present. Hades himself moved through the underworld with a calm certainty, as though he had always belonged to this quiet realm. His presence was not loud or imposing. It was steady, like the deep current of a river hidden beneath the frozen surface. He felt the cool touch of the stone pads beneath his sandals, the subtle brush of the faint, ever-present mists against his ropes. Each step carried him farther from the clamor of the upper world, yet he did not feel alone. Shadows bent slightly toward him, not in fear but in recognition, as though acknowledging the familiar presence of someone who understood the stillness of their home. From the edges of his sight, he could glimpse the flicker of phosphorescent light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It was soft, delicate, almost like the glow of a candle behind a veil. Hades allowed his fingers to brush the cold, rough stone, feeling the subtle grooves and patterns etched over countless years. They spoke of quiet endurance, of patience, and of a rhythm that moved slower than the waking world. It was a rhythm that suited him, one that encouraged thought, reflection, and a gentle kind of listening. The underworld was not empty, though it might have appeared so to a careless observer. Small creatures, almost too slight to notice, scuttled quietly along the edges of the rivers and pools. Their movements made soft ripples, tiny disturbances that vanished almost immediately, leaving the water as calm as before. Hades observed them with mild curiosity, noting the way they moved in harmony with the land, the way even the faintest sound seemed to belong somewhere, to matter in ways he did not yet fully understand. Everything here had a place, and every place had its own quiet song. At the center of this realm, Hades often found himself drawn to a great hall, carved of stone and shadow alike. It was a place of gentle echoes, where the footsteps of those who walked across its floors seemed to linger in the air for a moment, then dissolve into nothing. Here, the air was cooler, carrying a scent of earth and quiet waters. Hades liked to stand in the middle of the hall and close his eyes, letting the stillness fold around him. In those moments, he could feel the presence of the countless lives that had passed through this place, their energy neither heavy nor sorrowful, only present, quietly folded into the very air. He sometimes wondered about the world above, where the sun painted the sky in endless colors and the wind carried voices and scents in abundance. There was curiosity in him, though it was a gentle sort, not a longing that pained or a desire that pressed too hard. He imagined the warmth of sunlight on skin, the soft brush of grass beneath bare feet, the laughter of people moving freely through the bright day. And then he reminded himself, with small private smile, that the underworld held its own forms of beauty, the glint of minerals and riverbeds, the soft luminescence of fungi along walls, the muted, musical gurgle of water flowing beneath the stone bridges. It was during one of these quiet walks through his hall that Hades first became aware of another presence, delicate and subtle, almost like the echo of a sigh. He paused, listening carefully, letting the sound settle around him. It was faint at first, barely distinguishable from the natural hum of the underworld, but there was something curious in it, a softness, a tremor of gentle wonder. He followed it through corridors that twisted like the roots of ancient trees, stepping carefully over smooth stones, and feeling the faint vibrations in the ground as though the underworld itself whispered in response to his approach. There, at the edge of a pool that reflected dim light in slow, wavering patterns, he saw her. She moved with a quiet elegance, her presence almost blending with the shadows themselves. It was Persephone, though he did not need to name her to recognize the subtle warmth she brought into this cool, calm realm. Her gaze was curious but unafraid, touching the underworld not as a place of fear, but as one might touch a delicate garden of hidden flowers. Hades watched, intrigued by the way she seemed to harmonize with everything around her, as though she were learning the rhythms of this quiet place and adjusting her own heartbeat to match. "Do you like it here?" he asked softly, his voice nearly a whisper, careful not to disturb the gentle sound of water moving over stones. The words seemed almost unnecessary, as if he were simply acknowledging the presence he had already felt. Persephone smiled, a small, shy curve of lips. "It is different," she said, her voice low, like wind brushing across leaves. "Quiet, but not empty. I feel seen." Hades nodded, sensing the truth of her words. This was a realm where every presence mattered. Even those that moved silently or left no trace. He stepped closer, letting the faint light glint against his robes. "Then perhaps it is a place for you to feel at ease," he said. There was no boast or claim in his tone, only gentle consideration. As they stood together, the shadows around them seemed to lean slightly closer, carrying the soft murmur of distant water and the faint rustle of unseen creatures. Hades felt an unexpected warmth, subtle and tender, that seemed to rise not from light or heat, but from a quiet connection, a meeting of curiosity and calm attention. He realized that in all his time in the underworld, he had rarely encountered someone whose presence could shift the space around him so delicately, without rushing or disturbing the natural rhythm. The two moved slowly through the halls, their steps measured and soft. Persephone touched the walls lightly, her fingers tracing the gentle grooves, the tiny patterns formed over countless years. She leaned closer to look at a faint shimmer in the water, tilting her head as though trying to understand the quiet magic in its reflection. Hades followed her movements with calm attention, aware of the subtle rhythm of her curiosity and how it mirrored the rhythm of the realm itself. Each step, each pause, each tiny observation felt like a shared secret between them, a gentle acknowledgement that this place held wonders that could be seen only by those who cared to notice. As they wandered, Hades felt a thought emerge, quiet and deliberate. Perhaps this connection, this meeting of awareness and stillness, was not about possession or command. Perhaps it was about learning slowly and carefully the ways another could inhabit the quiet without breaking it. And in that gentle realization, he felt the beginnings of a bond that would carry through long centuries. A bond rooted not in grandeur or spectacle, but in the soft understanding of presence and patience. The mists drifted lightly around their feet as they approached a small bridge over a murmuring stream. The water glimmered faintly in the muted light, and the sound was low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat in slow motion. Hades paused at the edge, looking at Persephone, sensing the soft wonder in her eyes. She glanced at him, and he nodded slightly, encouraging without urging. Together, they stepped onto the bridge, letting it sway gently beneath their weight, the faint creak of wood and stone blending with the sound of flowing water. It was a quiet moment, almost imperceptible in the grand scheme of things, yet filled with gentle significance, a first meeting of curiosity and calm companionship in the depths of the underworld. As they reached the far side, the mists thickened slightly, curling around them like silk. Hades exhaled softly, letting the quiet embrace of the realm settle around him. He looked at Persephone, who tilted her head and smiled, and felt a gentle anticipation, not sharp or urgent, but soft, like the first hint of dawn just beyond the horizon. It was a moment poised between stillness and movement, a space where time seemed to stretch and settle, preparing for the journey that lay ahead. And in that calm, slow unfolding, Hades understood something profound. The underworld was not merely a place of endings. It was a place of patience, of gentle discovery, of quiet wonders that unfolded only to those willing to walk slowly, to listen deeply, and to notice the soft, hidden rhythms of life and shadow. With Persephone by his side, he felt the faint stirring of a story yet to be lived, one that would unfold gently, like water flowing over stone, carrying with it curiosity, quiet wonder, and the soft promise of time itself. The mists clung lightly to the stones as Hades and Persephone moved deeper into the underworld. Each step seemed measured not only by the contours of the path, but by the rhythm of their breathing, soft and even. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and subtle minerals, a scent that carried an odd comfort, as though the world itself was exhaling slowly. Persephone's fingers brushed the edges of carved walls, following grooves that looked like the trace of ancient roots, winding endlessly into the stone. Hades walked beside her, silent but present, letting her curiosity lead the way. He noticed the slight tilt of her head when she paused, the soft crease of her brow when she considered a reflection in the water, or a shimmer in the shadows. Each observation was a quiet conversation without words, a shared understanding that the underworld held more than its first appearance suggested. "You seem to know this place well," Persephone said softly, her voice echoing just enough to mingle with the gentle hum of water in the background. Hades smiled faintly. I have walked these paths for as long as I can remember. But the underworld changes, always subtly, with each presence it holds. It has been a long time since someone walked beside me like this. She glanced at him, curiosity flickering in her eyes. Do you think it can feel lonely? Lonely? He considered the question, feeling the quiet weight of the halls around them. Perhaps, but not in the way you might imagine. Loneliness is not always absent. Sometimes it is simply the lack of understanding, or the absence of someone who notices the small, quiet details. This place, it listens, and it remembers. Persephone took a slow step forward, her gaze following the faint glow of light reflecting off a narrow stream. The water seemed almost to hum, carrying a soft resonance that vibrated gently against her fingertips when she lowered her hand to touch it. It feels alive, she said, her voice softer than before, almost a whisper to the shadows themselves, even though it is quiet. Yes, Hades replied, watching her carefully. The underworld has life in subtle ways, in the spaces between things, in the pauses and echoes. Life does not always need movement or noise to exist. As they walked along the edge of a shallow river, Hades felt the water flow under the bridge in a slow, measured rhythm. He bent down and let his hand trail in the gentle current. The water was cool but not harsh, smooth as silk across his skin. Persephone joined him, and together they watched the tiny ripples spread outward, crossing each other softly before settling again. Each ripple seemed like a whisper, carrying stories of the past, of quiet meetings and subtle changes that had occurred over countless years. You can feel them? Persephone asked. Hades nodded. Yes, every presence leaves its mark, however faint. Even in a place like this, the echoes remain. They are part of the underworld's quiet music. She smiled, a small reflective curve of lips. Then this place is not frightening. It is gentle. I feel held in a way. That is the way it should be, Hades said, his voice as calm as the mist drifting around them. It is a home for what passes, but it also protects what remains. For a moment, neither spoke, allowing the silence to expand around them. The river murmured beneath the stone bridge. The faint glow of mineral veins in the walls shimmered, and tiny motes of light drifted lazily through the mists. Persephone leaned closer to the wall, brushing the delicate surface with her fingers, noticing tiny patterns carved by water and time. Each line seemed to trace the story of ages, delicate and patient, without haste or rush. Hades followed her movements with quiet attention. Do you see how the patterns seem random at first, yet they follow a rhythm? The underworld is like that. Everything has its place, even when it appears scattered. You just have to notice the quiet connections. Persephone looked at him, curiosity mingled with a subtle wonder. It is like a hidden garden, she said, full of small things that matter, even if no one else notices. Hades allowed himself a faint, private smile. Yes, that is exactly how it is. The path gradually led them toward a grove, not of trees, but of pale stone pillars rising like silent sentinels. The surface of each stone was etched with faint veins of color, as if sunlight had touched them once and left its memory behind. Between the pillars, soft pools reflected the dim glow from above, rippling ever so slightly with the movement of water flowing beneath the stone floor. Persephone paused at the edge of one pool, crouching slightly to peer into the reflection. It is endless, she whispered, tilting her head. I can see the water moving, yet I cannot see the bottom. That is because it does not end, Hades said softly, standing close behind her. Some things in this realm are meant to remind us that life, and its echoes, continue beyond what the eye can reach. Persephone dipped her fingers into the water. The touch was almost electric in its calmness, a sensation that traveled up her arm like a gentle stream of thought. She let her hand hover just above the surface for a moment, watching the concentric circles widen slowly. Hades observed her quietly, noting the small shift in her expression, the widening of her eyes, the soft intake of breath. She was learning to listen to the underworld in ways that he had sometimes forgotten to do, and he felt a subtle warmth at her presence, not from sunlight, but from awareness. Do you ever wonder about the upper world? Persephone asked, her voice a soft murmur, almost lost in the gentle rippling of the pools. Hades tilted his head slightly. Sometimes. But the underworld has its own rhythm. The upper world has sunlight and wind and sound. Here, there is patience and quiet understanding. Both are necessary, each in their own way. Persephone nodded, letting her fingers trail along the smooth edge of the pool. It is comforting in a way I did not expect. I thought it would be dark and lonely, but it feels balanced, alive in its own way. Hades moved to stand beside her, and together they watched the faint shimmer of the water, feeling the slow pulse of energy that ran beneath the stones. He realized in that quiet moment that her presence was changing the underworld slightly, not in shape or form, but in the subtle energy that filled the spaces. The shadows seemed softer, the reflections a little brighter, the faintest sense of music threading through the whispers of water. A soft breeze drifted through the grove, brushing against Persephone's hair and the folds of Hades' robes. It was as if the underworld itself were breathing with them, acknowledging the gentle connection that had begun to form. Hades felt a patient curiosity settle in his chest, the kind that does not rush or demand, but observes and waits. "Would you like to explore further?" he asked, his voice steady and calm. Persephone smiled, a quiet gleam in her eyes. "Yes, there is more to see, isn't there?" "Much more," Hades replied, extending his hand gently. "And I will walk with you." They moved together, stepping past the stone pillars and deeper into the grove, where soft mists curled like delicate tendrils around their ankles. The faint glow of minerals shimmered in the distance, and distant echoes of gentle streams carried their own rhythmic songs. Each step felt like a quiet unfolding of time, a gentle discovery, a shared awareness of the soft, hidden world beneath the surface. And as they walked, Hades thought quietly to himself that the underworld, for all its calm and patience, had never felt quite as alive as it did in the presence of someone who noticed the small wonders and listened to the subtle music of its depths. The journey was only beginning, yet he already sensed that it would stretch gently, patiently, like the slow drift of mist over stone, revealing secrets that could only be understood by those willing to walk quietly and pay attention to the world between shadows. By the time they reached the edge of another softly glowing pool, the mist had thickened slightly, curling like fine silk threads, carrying the faint echo of unseen waters. Persephone gazed at the gentle shimmer, her eyes reflecting both curiosity and wonder. Hades stepped beside her, and together they allowed the quiet to fill them, each heartbeat aligning with the rhythm of the realm itself. It was a space poised between stillness and motion, where time expanded, and every small observation became part of a larger story waiting to unfold. And in that calm, patient silence, a gentle anticipation lingered, one that promised discoveries yet unseen, subtle wonders that would emerge slowly, like the quiet opening of a hidden flower. It was a beginning soft and measured, of a journey that would reveal the depths of a world and the quiet strength of two presences moving in harmony with its patient rhythm. The underworld stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of shadowed corridors and softly glowing waters. Hades and Persephone moved with careful steps, letting the rhythm of the realm guide them. Each corner held a subtle scent, earth, stone, faint minerals, and the occasional hint of something softer, like a long-forgotten flower pressed into memory. Even in darkness, there was warmth in the textures and smells, and Persephone began to realize that the underworld was alive in ways entirely different from the sunlit world above. Hades led the way through a narrow passage where the walls seemed closer than usual, the stones smooth under his fingers. The air here carried a faint, almost musical vibration, a subtle resonance that moved like a low hum beneath the skin. Persephone paused, tilting her head and closing her eyes for a moment, feeling the quiet pulse. "Do you feel that?" she whispered. "Yes," Hades replied, his voice soft. "It is the echo of the earth itself. The underworld has many voices, some quiet, some deep. Only those who pay attention notice them." She opened her eyes and traced the wall with her fingertips, feeling the gentle hum vibrate through her hand. The stone seemed alive, not in a frightening way, but in a patient, enduring way, like a melody stretching across centuries. Persephone marveled at the thought that this quiet song had existed long before she arrived, continuing uninterrupted, carrying the memory of all who had ever walked here. The passage opened into a small chamber where pools of water collected in soft curves, reflecting the faint luminescence from the mineral veins above. The water moved slowly, almost imperceptibly, and the surface seemed to hold secrets, as though it remembered every ripple ever made. Persephone knelt at the edge, leaning close to study the reflection of her own face. It appeared softened, framed by faint glimmers of light, her features mirrored in the calm liquid. "Everything feels timeless," she said, her voice barely more than a sigh. "Like it existed before me, and will exist long after." Hades stepped closer, resting a hand lightly on the edge of the pool beside her. "That is the way of this place. Time is not measured in moments here, but in currents, in echoes. And each presence adds its own thread to the fabric of the realm." She nodded slowly, tracing circles on the water's surface with her fingertips. The ripples spread outward, overlapping and weaving like a quiet dance. "It is beautiful," she said. "Not like the sun above, but beautiful all the same." Hades watched her, noticing the gentle way she connected with the space, and he felt a rare stirring of warmth within the calm of his usual solitude. He had long appreciated the underworld in quiet reflection, but seeing it through her eyes brought new textures, new subtle melodies to light. For the first time in centuries, the halls and chambers felt less like stone and shadow, and more like a place capable of quiet companionship. From the far corner of the chamber, a soft sound emerged, almost like the faint brushing of wings against water. Hades turned slightly, attentive yet unalarmed. "The underworld has its guardians," he explained quietly. "Not all are seen, but all are present. They maintain the balance, ensure the rhythm continues." Persephone tilted her head, listening intently. "Are they a dangerous?" Hades shook his head gently. "Danger is not the right word. They are careful. They observe and respond. Think of them as the stewards of this quiet place, gentle in their own way, alert to disturbances, yet never hasty." A small ripple shifted in the pool, and a faint shimmer of movement emerged beneath the surface. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Persephone caught it, her eyes widening slightly. She leaned closer, curiosity blending with awe. "It is like it is alive." "Yes," Hades agreed. "Even the smallest things carry life here. Notice them, and they will show you more than you expect." Persephone spent a long moment studying the tiny movements in the water. Each flicker of light, each subtle wave, seemed to tell a story, a quiet tale of endurance, patience, and the careful dance of existence. She realized that the underworld was not merely a place of endings. It was a place of continuity, where every ripple, every echo mattered. Hades observed her silently, letting her discoveries unfold naturally. There was no rush, no need to explain everything at once. The underworld revealed its secrets in time, and the gentle pace allowed for a deep kind of understanding, the kind that lingered in thought and memory. Moving forward, they approached a corridor where the walls arched high overhead, forming soft shadows that shifted with a faint glow of light. The air carried a delicate fragrance, like the scent of rain on dry earth, mixed with the faint sweetness of unseen blossoms. Persephone inhaled softly, the smell grounding her as they walked. Hades matched her pace, his calm presence a quiet anchor as she explored the gentle textures and sounds. A soft rustle echoed from a nearby alcove, causing Persephone to glance toward it. A small creature emerged, delicate and almost transparent, its body reflecting the muted light like a living gem. It moved with slow, deliberate grace, and Persephone crouched slightly, allowing it to pass without disturbance. Hades nodded approvingly, recognizing the subtle interaction. Every creature here moves with patience. They know the rhythm and respect it. Persephone smiled softly, watching the creature disappear into the shadows. "It feels peaceful," she said. "Even the little ones are part of the song." "Yes," Hades agreed. "Peace is found in understanding the small, quiet patterns. Even the tiniest presence can shape the flow of this place." They continued along the corridor until it opened into another chamber, larger than the last. Here, the walls were veined with faint luminescence, creating patterns that seemed to shift like slow-moving clouds. Water trickled from small channels carved into the stone, forming pools that mirrored the delicate light. Persephone paused, standing in the center, and allowed the stillness to surround her. She felt the gentle vibration of the earth beneath her feet, a slow, measured heartbeat that matched her own in quiet resonance. Hades watched her, noting the way her eyes softened as she took in the scene, the slight lift of her lips, the gentle tilt of her head. He realized that her presence had brought a new layer to this place, a subtle warmth that did not disturb the calm but deepened it. The underworld, usually a realm of quiet reflection, now held a shared curiosity, a gentle dialogue between two beings moving through time and space together. A faint glow rose from one of the pools, illuminating the chamber with a soft, amber light. Persephone knelt to examine it, tracing patterns in the water with her fingers. The ripples spread slowly, overlapping and reflecting the shimmering veins in the walls. She laughed softly, a sound like wind through leaves, noticing the way the light danced with each movement. Hades stepped beside her, allowing her exploration to take the lead. "You notice things most would overlook," he said, quietly admiring her attentiveness. "I am learning," Persephone replied, eyes still tracing the subtle movements. "It is not just seeing but feeling, noticing the quiet connections." "Yes," Hades said, "and that is why this place is gentle. It rewards attention, patience, and care." They remained in the chamber for a while, moving slowly, letting their fingers trace patterns in the water, listening to the soft echoes of dripping streams, and observing the tiny creatures moving unnoticed along the stone floor. Time stretched in soft, unbroken waves, and Persephone felt a sense of wonder she had never known, a calm curiosity that pulsed with the quiet rhythm of the underworld itself. Eventually, Hades gestured toward a narrow passage leading deeper into the shadows. "There is more to see," he said softly. "Shall we continue?" Persephone nodded, brushing her hands lightly and following him with a gentle step. The mists curled around their ankles, carrying the faint scent of earth and distant blooms. Each step felt like a gentle unfolding, a slow unveiling of hidden wonders waiting quietly for discovery. And as they moved further into the underworld, a soft anticipation lingered in the air, a subtle promise that the chambers ahead held stories yet to be felt, gentle echoes waiting to be heard, and quiet marvels that would continue to unfold as patiently as the mists drifting across the stone floors. The corridor before them narrowed slightly, the walls curling inward as though guiding their steps. The faint luminescence from mineral veins above cast soft, wavering shadows that danced across the stone floor. Hades led Persephone forward, his footsteps quiet and deliberate, matching the rhythm of the mists that drifted lazily around their ankles. Every breath they took seemed to mingle with the gentle aroma of earth and flowing water, filling the air with a quiet, comforting presence. As they moved, the soft murmur of running water reached their ears, subtle at first, almost lost in the whispers of the stone walls. Persephone tilted her head, listening with careful attention. "Do you hear that?" she asked softly. Hades nodded. "It is one of the rivers of the underworld. Not all of them are vast or thunderous. Some are gentle, carrying stories rather than storms." The sound grew clearer as they descended a shallow slope, revealing a narrow river gliding slowly beneath the stone archways. Its surface shimmered faintly, reflecting soft light in delicate patterns, as if each ripple carried a secret waiting to be understood. The river's current moved with a quiet patience, curling around rocks and pools, carrying whispers of all that had passed along its course. Persephone crouched at the edge, letting her fingers graze the cool water. A faint, pleasant tingle traveled up her arm, subtle but undeniable, as though the river itself acknowledged her presence. She drew her hand back slowly, watching the tiny ripples spread outward, each movement delicate and transient. "It feels alive," she murmured, marveling at the gentle current. "Yes," Hades replied softly. "The rivers of this place hold the memories of countless journeys. They do not rush. They move steadily, carrying what must continue and cradling what is delicate. Watch closely, and they will teach you patience." Persephone leaned closer, letting the gentle sound of water guide her attention. Tiny stones beneath the surface glimmered faintly, illuminated by the dim light from above. She traced their shapes with her gaze, noticing the way the current curled around each one, shaping a slow, rhythmic dance. The river seemed alive not in movement alone, but in the deliberate, careful way it carried every pebble, every whisper of wind, and every particle of silt along its path. Hades stood beside her, his eyes following the slow flow. Everything here has its own rhythm. Even the currents of water have patience. Even the smallest stone has a story. The underworld rewards quiet observation and respect. Persephone smiled softly, letting her fingers hover just above the water, imagining the stories carried within. "It is a comforting," she said, even though it is not like the rivers above. There is no rush, no urgency, just slowly unfolding. Hades nodded. Yes, this place is steady, unhurried. There is a kind of peace in knowing that everything has its place and its pace. A gentle breeze drifted through the chamber, barely perceptible, carrying a faint scent of minerals and something floral, subtle, and sweet. Persephone inhaled slowly, feeling the calm settle deeper within her. She lowered herself to sit by the river's edge, letting the cool stones press softly against her palms. Hades sat beside her, close enough to share the quiet presence, but leaving space for her to feel the river's subtle song on her own. Together, they watched the flow, noticing the small creatures that moved along the banks, tiny, almost transparent beings whose presence was easy to overlook. Persephone leaned forward slightly, eyes wide with wonder. They are so delicate, she whispered. I almost didn't see them. But they belong here, just as much as we do. Exactly, Hades said. Even the smallest presence matters. Even the quietest life shapes the rhythm of this place. Everything contributes to the balance, whether it is noticed or not. Persephone smiled, tracing a small circle in the water. The ripple expanded slowly, intersecting with others and merging into the gentle current. Each circle seemed like a soft pulse of connection, a subtle reflection of the lives flowing around them, both above and below. Hades watched her with calm attention. You notice the connections that others overlook, he said. That is why your presence here feels meaningful. Not in the way of grand gestures or loud events, but in a quiet, careful understanding of the world as it truly is. She turned to look at him, eyes reflecting the soft glow of the river. It is different from the upper world, she said. There, everything moves too quickly. Here, I can breathe. I can see the small things and know they matter. Hades nodded, feeling a rare warmth in the calm of his own domain. That is why the underworld endures. It may seem still, even lonely to some, but it carries all that must continue. It cradles what the world above cannot always protect. Persephone leaned her hands lightly on the water again, watching the way the gentle current curled around stones and plants, guiding them steadily forward. It feels safe, she said softly, not in the way of barriers or walls, but in the sense that everything has its place and purpose. Yes, Hades replied, his voice low and steady. There is quiet protection here, not forceful or harsh, but enduring, gentle, and constant. They sat for some time, letting the river's gentle pulse fill the space between them. Tiny motes of light drifted in the mists above, faint as fireflies in the soft glow, carrying a sense of slow, rhythmic wonder. Persephone's thoughts moved with the water, drifting and bending gently, reflecting on the intricate beauty of even the smallest details. She felt a profound calm, as though the river had not only reflected the light but also the quiet pulse of her own thoughts. Eventually, Hades rose, standing slowly and offering his hand. Persephone took it, standing beside him, feeling the warmth of connection that was quiet yet steady. Shall we continue? He asked, his voice a soft echo against the stone walls. Yes, she replied, her eyes reflecting curiosity and gentle anticipation. I want to see more. They followed the river as it wound through the chamber, the soft current guiding their path. Along its banks, tiny flowers had begun to grow in subtle clusters, their petals pale and luminous. Persephone knelt to touch one, marveling at the delicate texture and gentle fragrance. Even in the shadows, there is life, she whispered. Yes, Hades said quietly. Life finds a way in every space. And here, it moves slowly, carefully, in harmony with all that exists. The corridor narrowed again, and the river curved gently beneath a low archway. The mists thickened slightly, curling around their ankles, carrying the faint scent of earth and unseen blooms. Each step felt like a quiet discovery, a patient unfolding of wonders that could only be seen by those willing to move slowly and notice. As they continued, Persephone glanced at Hades. I think I am beginning to understand, she said softly. This place is not merely a resting space. It is alive in ways I had never imagined. And it teaches patience, gentle observation, and care. Hades smiled faintly, a rare softness in his eyes. Exactly. And with time, you will see even more. The underworld has lessons hidden in its currents, in its shadows, and in its quiet songs. Every step reveals something new. If one moves with attention and gentle curiosity, they followed the river as it bent slowly through the chamber, leaving faint ripples behind them, each one a soft echo of presence, a quiet trace of passage. And as the current whispered along the stone, carrying memories and subtle energy, Persephone felt the gentle anticipation of discovery settle into her heart. The journey was only beginning, yet each step, each glance, each touch promised wonders yet to be revealed, quiet marvels that move at the patient, steady rhythm of the underworld itself. The river had led them to a wider chamber, where soft mists curled lazily over stone floors, and the air carried a faint fragrance, earthy and sweet, like rain on sun-warmed soil. Light glimmered faintly from mineral veins in the walls, casting delicate reflections that danced slowly across the surface of shallow pools. Persephone paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath, feeling the calm settle into her chest. "This place," she whispered, her voice low and reverent. "It feels different from the corridors we passed through." Hades nodded, observing her closely. "This is one of the quieter places in the underworld. Not all beauty here is loud. Some of it is hidden, waiting for those who notice with care." Persephone stepped forward slowly, letting her fingertips brush the stone walls. The textures were smooth in some places, rough in others, patterned by slow currents of time. Tiny, delicate plants had begun to take root along the edges of pools and in cracks of stone, their pale leaves catching the faint luminescence. Even in shadow, life persisted gently, and it seemed to respond subtly to their presence. "It is like a garden," Persephone said softly, "but one without sunlight, yet alive all the same." "Yes," Hades said, his tone steady and calm. "Life finds a way in every place, even here. It moves carefully, without haste, in harmony with the world around it." She knelt beside one of the small pools, letting the water ripple softly beneath her hands. Tiny reflections shimmered like distant stars, moving gently with the current. "It feels peaceful," she murmured. "I can almost hear the water speaking, though it makes no sound." Hades moved closer, standing quietly beside her. "The underworld has many voices," he said softly. "Some speak in echoes, some in movement, and some in the silence between moments. You have a way of listening that brings them into clarity." Persephone smiled faintly, tilting her head to watch the small creatures skittering along the edges of pools. They were delicate, translucent beings, moving slowly and deliberately, as though fully aware of the careful balance around them. "Even the smallest life feels significant here," she said, marveling at their subtle grace. "Yes," Hades agreed. "Everything contributes, no matter its size. Even the quietest presence leaves its mark, a ripple in the fabric of the underworld." They wandered through the garden slowly, noticing the tiny blossoms growing along stone edges and the faint veins of light reflecting off water. Persephone knelt beside a cluster of pale flowers, brushing their delicate petals gently. She inhaled their subtle fragrance, feeling calm and connected in a way she had never known in the sunlit world above. Hades watched her quietly, sensing the shift in the energy of the chamber. It was as though her attention brought the garden to life, revealing the hidden harmonies and small movements that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. The shadows seemed softer, the reflections brighter, and the currents of water more musical. "Do you always notice these things?" Persephone asked softly, glancing up at him. Hades considered the question. "I have learned to notice," he said at last. "When one spends enough time in a place, the rhythms become clearer. The underworld teaches patience, observation, and quiet respect for all that exists." Persephone reached her hands into a shallow pool, letting the water ripple around her fingers. She watched the reflection shift, faint glimmers of light dancing along the surface. "It feels infinite," she whispered. "Like every small detail is connected to something larger." "Yes," Hades replied softly. "The underworld is a web of quiet connections. Each life, each echo, each ripple contributes to the harmony. Patience allows one to see it all unfold." They moved together through the garden, following the curves of shallow streams and small pools. The mists drifted gently around their ankles, curling in delicate spirals as though aware of their presence. Persephone noticed a faint shimmer along the edges of a stone archway, a pattern etched by time and water, subtle yet beautiful. She leaned closer, tracing the grooves with her fingertips. "Everything tells a story," she murmured, marveling at the intricate patterns. "Yes," Hades said softly. "The underworld holds countless stories. Some are quiet, almost invisible. Others are revealed slowly, through observation and gentle attention. There is no rush here. Everything unfolds in its own time." Persephone stood, brushing the dust from her robes, and looked around the chamber. She felt a sense of calm wonder, a gentle curiosity that pulled her forward. "I want to see more," she said, a small smile on her lips. Hades extended his hand, and she took it without hesitation. Together, they continued along the path, moving deeper into the garden. Soft pools reflected the faint glow of mineral veins, and tiny ripples from their steps spread outward, overlapping and merging with the gentle currents already in motion. Each movement seemed deliberate yet effortless, as though the world itself encouraged their careful exploration. A soft rustling came from a nearby cluster of plants, drawing Persephone's attention. Tiny, delicate creatures emerged from the shadows, moving slowly and deliberately along the edges of the pools. Their translucent bodies glimmered faintly in the soft light, and Persephone crouched slightly to watch them pass. Hades observed silently, appreciating the way she connected with the small life around her, noticing the patterns and rhythms that most would overlook. "They are so delicate," she whispered. "And yet, they belong completely." "Yes," Hades said softly. "All life here has purpose. Even the smallest presence contributes to the balance." Observing them teaches patience and respect. They continued through the garden, following winding paths that curved around gentle streams and clusters of glowing stones. Persephone reached out to touch a pale flower, noticing the subtle vibration as her fingertips brushed the petals. Hades watched her, feeling a warmth that was soft, steady, and unexpected in the calm of his usual solitude. "Even in shadow," Persephone said softly, "there is life. Even in quiet, there is movement and growth." Hades nodded. "Yes, this is the quiet strength of the underworld. It nurtures, protects, and preserves. It is gentle, patient, and enduring." They walked on, hand in hand, letting the quiet of the garden envelop them. The mists curled around their ankles, and the soft light reflected in pools and stones, creating a rhythm that matched the gentle pulse of their steps. Each small discovery, each careful observation, deepened their connection to the realm and to each other. By the time they reached the edge of the garden, the shadows had deepened slightly, curling around the edges of the chamber like soft blankets. Persephone looked back once, letting the calm and beauty of the space sink into her memory. "I never imagined a place like this existed," she said softly. "It is alive in a quiet, patient way." Hades nodded, feeling the steady rhythm of the underworld flow through him. "It is a place for those who notice," he said. "Those who are willing to move slowly, observe, and respect the quiet. And with time, it reveals even more." The path ahead curved gently into darkness, the soft glow of distant pools guiding their steps. Persephone took a deep breath, sensing the anticipation of further discoveries. Hades offered his hand once more, and she took it, stepping forward into the next chamber with gentle curiosity and calm wonder. And as they moved, the underworld whispered softly around them, carrying ripples of water, faint rustlings, and subtle reflections, promising more gentle marvels, quiet stories, and patient rhythms waiting to be discovered in the journey ahead. The path from the garden narrowed again, winding gently through stone corridors whose walls seemed older than time itself. The faint luminescence from mineral veins above reflected softly against the smooth stone, casting delicate patterns that shifted slowly as they walked. Hades and Persephone moved quietly, their footsteps almost merging with the gentle hum of the underworld, a rhythm that felt neither hurried nor endless, simply constant. Persephone glanced around, noticing the subtle textures of the walls, the faint irregularities in the stone, and the soft glimmer of water trickling from hidden cracks. "Everywhere I look," she whispered, "I feel like the walls themselves are alive, almost as if they remember everything that has passed through here." Hades nodded. "In a way, they do. Every presence leaves a trace. Every sound, every step, every touch lingers for a while. The underworld remembers quietly. It does not shout or demand attention, but it holds everything in patient balance." Ahead, The corridor opened into a chamber unlike any they had yet encountered. It was circular, with a high vaulted ceiling that seemed to curve into the soft glow of the mineral veins. The air carried a faint echo, not loud or startling, but subtle, like a distant whisper that lingered just long enough to be noticed. Persephone paused at the entrance, her eyes wide with gentle curiosity. "This place feels different," she murmured. "Yes," Hades said softly, stepping beside her. "This is the chamber of faint echoes. Here, even the softest sound resonates, lingering in ways that reveal patterns and connections you might otherwise miss." Persephone stepped forward cautiously, letting her hand brush the smooth wall. She noticed how even the tiniest movement of air caused a faint vibration through the stone, as if the chamber itself responded to her presence. She took a small breath and let out a whisper, marveling as the words lingered, repeating faintly in the still air. Hades smiled faintly, watching her interaction with the chamber. "The echoes here are gentle," he explained. "They carry memories of the past, small impressions of presence. They do not judge or frighten. They only reflect what has been and continue quietly." Persephone knelt beside a shallow pool at the chamber's center. The water's surface shimmered faintly, reflecting the soft glow from above. She traced gentle circles with her fingertips, watching the ripples overlap and merge. "Even the water seems to remember," she whispered. "Each movement leaves a trace, however small." "Yes," Hades agreed. "Everything in this place has memory, even the currents and the stones. The underworld is not empty. It is alive in subtle ways, holding what is gentle and what is important." They moved slowly through the chamber, their footsteps carefully measured to avoid disturbing the delicate echoes. Tiny creatures moved along the edges of the pools, their presence almost imperceptible, but entirely integrated into the rhythm of the chamber. Persephone crouched to watch them, fascinated by the way their soft movements contributed to the overall harmony. "It is so quiet," she said softly, "but not lonely. It feels full in a way I can feel rather than see." Hades nodded. "The quiet here is different from emptiness. It is a fullness that comes from careful balance, from patience and observation. Even absence has a place in the underworld design." Persephone let her hand hover above the water, feeling the faint vibration of each ripple as it passed beneath her fingertips. The subtle energy seemed to hum in harmony with her heartbeat, a quiet alignment that brought calm to her chest. "It feels safe," she murmured. "Not because there are walls or barriers, but because everything is in balance." "Yes," Hades said softly. "Safety in the underworld comes from understanding and respect, not force. Here, all things move in rhythm with each other, and each presence contributes without overwhelming the whole." She rose slowly, brushing her hands against her robes, and turned to look at Hades. "I am beginning to understand," she said quietly. "This place, it teaches patience, attention, and gentle care. Even the smallest ripple, the softest sound matters." Hades reached out his hand, offering it to her. Persephone took it, stepping closer. "And you will continue to learn," he said, his voice steady and calm. "Every chamber, every river, every echo offers something new if one is willing to notice and listen." Together, they moved to the center of the chamber, letting their presence blend with the gentle hum of echoes and water. Persephone traced delicate lines along the stone floor, following the subtle patterns etched by time and currents. Each movement caused a faint ripple in the air and water, a quiet conversation between presence and space. Hades watched silently, sensing the growing connection between her and the underworld. Her curiosity and gentle observation were awakening nuances in the chamber that he had long appreciated but rarely experienced so vividly. The echoes seemed brighter, the faint ripples more musical, as if the chamber itself acknowledged her attentiveness. A soft breeze drifted through the open archways, carrying the faint scent of minerals and unseen blooms. Persephone closed her eyes briefly, letting the quiet and rhythm of the chamber fill her senses. "It feels endless," she whispered. "Like it has existed before me, and will continue long after I am gone." "Yes," Hades said, standing close but not interrupting her contemplation. "Time here moves differently. It is not measured in moments or days, but in currents, echoes, and gentle presence. Everything endures patiently." Persephone opened her eyes and looked at the far side of the chamber, where the stone walls curved into a narrow corridor shrouded in soft mists. "Shall we continue?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with anticipation. Hades extended his hand once more. "Yes," he said gently. "There is always more to see, more to notice. Every step brings new rhythms, new stories, new reflections waiting quietly for those who care to observe." They followed the corridor together, moving carefully, their steps harmonizing with the subtle echoes and currents of the chamber. The mists curled around their ankles, and the faint luminescence from the walls reflected in soft patterns that shifted slowly with their movement. Each step felt like a continuation of the chamber itself, a gentle unfolding that connected them to the quiet pulse of the underworld. Persephone glanced back once, letting the calm and beauty of the chamber sink into her memory. "I feel a part of it," she said softly, "not as an intruder, but as someone who belongs in a small way." Hades nodded, sensing the alignment of her presence with the quiet rhythms of the underworld. "And that is how it should be," he said. "Here, every presence matters, every attention matters. Even the smallest gesture contributes to the harmony of the whole." They stepped into the corridor beyond, leaving the chamber of faint echoes behind, carrying with them the gentle hum of memory and reflection. The mists continued to curl around their ankles, guiding them forward, as the underworld whispered softly in anticipation of the discoveries yet to come, subtle wonders waiting to be revealed in the calm, patient rhythm of the realm. Persephone followed Hades down the winding corridor, her steps light and deliberate. The soft glow from mineral veins above guided them, stretching long, pale shadows along the walls. Her fingertips brushed the cool stone, tracing the faint grooves left by centuries of quiet movement. Hades moved beside her, silent and steady, his presence as calming as the slow rhythm of the underworld itself. Ahead, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. The air shifted slightly, warmer than before, carrying a delicate scent of damp earth mixed with something floral, sweet but subtle. Persephone paused at the entrance, taking a slow, careful breath. Light flickered across the high ceiling, soft and gentle, not like fire or sun, but like memory made visible. "Do you see that?" she whispered, her voice almost lost in the quiet hum of the chamber. Hades nodded, stepping closer. "Yes, those are the gentle lights. They appear to those who move quietly and notice the small rhythms of the underworld." Persephone moved forward, letting her gaze follow the delicate, floating points of illumination. They hovered just above the floor, drifting lazily in soft, unpredictable patterns. Their glow was warm and muted, casting faint reflections on the stone walls and shallow pools that dotted the chamber floor. As she stepped carefully, the light seemed to shift in response, circling slowly around her feet before settling again. Hades watched her closely, noting the way her eyes widened with quiet wonder. She reached out a hand, and a light hovered near her fingertips, trembling softly as though acknowledging her touch. She laughed very softly, a sound like wind brushing over leaves. "It feels alive," she whispered. "Yes," Hades said gently. "They are born from quiet attention. They are not separate from the underworld. They are part of it, made visible only when one moves with care and curiosity." Persephone knelt beside a shallow pool, letting the floating lights reflect on its surface. She reached into the water, and the lights danced softly across her hands, their gentle shimmer moving with each ripple she created. She watched them, captivated, feeling a deep calm settle into her chest. Hades moved beside her, kneeling slightly to place a hand on the edge of the pool. "Notice how each light responds to the smallest movement," he said. "Even the gentlest ripple carries a story. The underworld has patience, but it also notices those who pay attention." Persephone tilted her head, observing the soft interplay of water and light. "It is like they are whispering to each other," she murmured. "A conversation only I can't hear." "Yes," Hades said softly. "Everything here communicates in its own way. Even the smallest presence has a voice if you listen carefully." She allowed her fingers to rest in the water, watching the reflection of a light drift across the surface. The glow followed the ripples, folding and unfolding, merging with other reflections and patterns she could not predict but could appreciate fully. "It is peaceful," she said, her voice a slow sigh. Hades nodded, noting the gentle ease with which she moved through the chamber. "The underworld is not meant to frighten. It is meant to endure, to hold, and to reveal the subtle rhythms of life and memory. Here, everything unfolds gently, without hurry. Persephone rose slowly, brushing her hands against her robes, and watched as a cluster of lights hovered near the far wall. They moved in a slow, lazy spiral, shimmering faintly, and she followed them, letting curiosity guide her steps. Hades followed without a word, steady and silent, allowing her discoveries to unfold naturally. She crouched near a pool at the center of the chamber and traced the edges with her fingertips. The lights hovered over her hand, dipping and rising gently as though performing a quiet dance. Persephone's eyes sparkled with wonder. "It feels like the underworld is alive," she whispered. "Not in the way I imagined before, but in its own quiet way." Hades knelt beside her again, observing the interplay of light and water. "It is alive," he said softly. "Alive in patience, in memory, in attention. Life here is subtle, gentle, and enduring." The lights reflect that. Persephone reached out toward one drifting light, and it lingered near her fingers, shimmering more brightly for a heartbeat before moving slowly away. She smiled, letting her hand hover as she watched its movement. "Even in the shadows, there is beauty," she said quietly. "Even where there is stillness, there is life." "Yes," Hades said, "and those who notice it become part of that life." The underworld is not silent. It is full of quiet songs, patient stories, and gentle rhythms. Only some hear them fully. She rose to her feet, letting the soft glow of the lights wash over her. They hovered around them as if acknowledging her presence, their warmth subtle, comforting, and constant. Persephone glanced at Hades. "I'm beginning to understand why this place endures," she said softly. "Because it moves slowly, observes carefully, and holds all things with care." Hades extended a hand, and she took it, stepping forward as the lights followed gently, drifting around their feet and reflecting in shallow pools. The path curved toward another corridor, faintly lit by the lingering glow of minerals and floating lights. Each step felt like a quiet continuation of the chamber's rhythm, a gentle unfolding that invited them further into the mysteries of the underworld. Persephone looked back once, letting the calm and wonder of the chamber settle into her memory. "I never imagined light could feel so soft," she whispered. "So alive in a quiet way." Hades nodded, allowing the quiet to fill the space between them. "That is the gift of noticing," he said. "To move gently, observe patiently, and let the quiet guide you. The underworld rewards attention, and it shares its subtle stories in turn." They continued down the corridor, hand in hand, the gentle lights hovering behind them like quiet companions. The soft glow faded gradually, merging with the luminescence of the stone walls, as the underworld whispered softly in anticipation of the next discovery. Each step promised subtle marvels, patient rhythms, and quiet wonders waiting to reveal themselves in the calm, enduring pulse of the realm. Persephone followed Hades along a winding corridor that gradually opened into a wide chamber. The walls here were carved with faint, flowing patterns that looked like the movement of leaves in a breeze, though no air stirred. The floor was soft underfoot, a mixture of smooth stone and patches of moss that felt gentle against her bare ankles. "This feels different," she whispered, stepping lightly across the moss. "Like walking in a forest, but inside stone." Hades nodded silently, walking beside her. "This is the forest of quiet shadows," he said. "It is a place where life continues in subtle ways. Not all growth needs sunlight. Here, shadows provide shelter, and gentle echoes carry the rhythm of existence." Persephone bent down to touch a small sprout pushing delicately from a crack in the floor. Its leaves were pale green, faintly luminous and soft to the touch. She let her hand linger over it, feeling a subtle warmth that seemed to pulse with life. "Even here," she whispered, "everything grows with care." "Yes," Hades said quietly. "Growth here is patient. It does not rush or demand attention. It simply unfolds when the time is right." The chamber extended further, with slender stone columns rising like trunks and faint patterns of leaves etched across the ceiling. Persephone walked slowly, letting her eyes follow the intricate carvings. Tiny creatures moved along the mossy floor, translucent and delicate, their movements precise and deliberate. "They are so small," she said softly, "yet they feel important, as if they hold the balance of the forest." Hades knelt beside her, watching a creature move past her fingers. Every presence matters, he said. Even the quietest, smallest life contributes to the harmony here. Nothing is overlooked. Persephone smiled faintly, reaching toward a small glowing plant whose light shimmered gently in the dim chamber. The glow shifted as her fingers brushed past, casting soft reflections on the nearby stone. She noticed how the light seemed to respond to her attention, moving delicately as if acknowledging her presence. "It is alive," she whispered. "Not like the flowers above, but in its own quiet way." "Yes," Hades agreed. "Life takes many forms. Here, it exists in patience, in subtle movement, in gentle light. The underworld nurtures all of it." Persephone continued forward, feeling the soft moss beneath her feet and listening to faint, melodic echoes that drifted through the chamber. Each sound seemed to carry a memory, a whisper of time passing slowly and carefully. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the subtle harmonies fill her senses, feeling herself connected to the rhythm of the place. Hades moved beside her, his voice calm. "The forest is a reminder that even in shadow, life persists. It adapts, moves carefully, and creates balance. That is why this chamber exists, to show the endurance and patience of quiet growth." Persephone crouched by a small pool where the reflection of faintly glowing leaves danced on the water. Tiny ripples formed as she dipped her fingertips in, and the leaves seemed to sway with the gentle movement. "It feels like everything is connected," she murmured. "Even the water, the plants, the shadows, all of it moves together." Hades nodded. "Exactly. Harmony is found in quiet observation. In the underworld, every movement, every presence has its place. Nothing is wasted. Even the smallest ripple has meaning." She lingered a moment longer, letting her hands trace patterns in the water. The tiny glowing plants responded subtly, their light bending softly toward her touch. Persephone felt a warm calm settle deep within her, the kind that comes from understanding one is part of a larger rhythm. Standing, she looked around at the slender stone columns and faintly etched leaves above. "It is beautiful," she said softly, "even without the sun, without the wind. It has its own life." "Yes," Hades said, walking beside her. "The forest teaches patience, endurance, and gentle observation. You notice what others often overlook, and in doing so, you become part of the quiet balance here." Persephone smiled faintly, reaching out to touch a glowing leaf drifting near her hand. Its light bent softly around her fingers, a subtle acknowledgement of her presence. She glanced at Hades. "I want to keep exploring," she said, her voice calm but curious. Hades nodded. "There is always more to see. Each chamber, each shadow, each delicate presence has its own story. The underworld reveals itself slowly, patiently, to those who notice and care." They walked further into the forest chamber, the soft moss cushioning their steps. The faint light from glowing leaves and delicate plants bathed the room in a serene glow, while shadows moved gently across the walls. Persephone felt her heartbeat align with the rhythm of the forest, slow and steady, and her curiosity deepened with every careful step. A narrow path appeared, winding toward a cluster of softly glowing stones. Persephone paused, taking in the gentle shimmer and the delicate movement of tiny creatures among moss. "Even here, life is patient," she whispered. "Nothing hurries, nothing demands. It just exists quietly." "Yes," Hades said softly. "And the underworld teaches the value of that quiet patience. Even the smallest presence matters. Even the gentlest movement contributes to the rhythm of all." Persephone took Hades' hand again, stepping lightly onto the winding path. The moss pressed softly beneath her feet, the gentle light of plants and stones illuminating the way. Shadows curled and drifted with them, bending slowly over walls and columns, creating a calm, immersive pattern of movement. She glanced back once, letting the serene glow of the forest sink into her memory. "I feel a part of it," she said softly, "as if the quiet has welcomed me." Hades nodded, his voice gentle. "And that is how it should be. The underworld holds many quiet places, and each one offers patience, life, and balance to those who are willing to notice." Together, they continued along the winding path, the soft glow guiding their way deeper into the forest. Tiny creatures moved carefully around them, moss and water reflecting the light, and the shadows whispered around their ankles. Each step was deliberate, each movement a gentle conversation with the world around them, and Persephone felt a growing sense of calm, curiosity, and connection with the quiet, enduring rhythm of the underworld. Persephone stepped carefully along the narrow stone path, her hand brushing lightly against the wall, feeling the cool grooves that had formed over centuries. The faint luminescence of mineral veins traced patterns along the stone, painting soft, wandering lines across the floor. The corridor opened gradually into a wider chamber, and her eyes widened as she took in the sight before her. A river stretched before them, moving slowly, its surface shimmering with a faint silver light. The water flowed quietly, carrying tiny ripples that reflected the glow of the stones and the subtle shimmer of mist curling just above the surface. The sound was gentle, a soft susurration that filled the chamber without demanding attention. Persephone knelt at the edge, letting her fingers touch the water. The current moved over her skin in slow, cool waves, each ripple deliberate, soothing, and quiet. Hades stood a little behind her, watching silently. "The river responds to presence," he said softly. "It carries more than water. Every sound, every motion, every quiet step leaves its trace here." Persephone dipped her hand further, letting the water curl around her wrist. Tiny lights shimmered beneath the surface, almost imperceptible at first, and then brighter as she moved her fingers. Small shapes drifted lazily, translucent and delicate, their motion so gentle that it felt like the river itself was breathing. She watched them for a long moment, feeling a calm pulse that seemed to rise from the water and settle into her chest. "They are beautiful," she whispered. "So delicate, yet so alive." "Yes," Hades replied. "Even the quietest life carries purpose. Even the softest current leaves a trace. The river here teaches attention." She shifted slightly, letting her fingertips trace small arcs along the water's surface. Each ripple spread outward, overlapping others, merging into larger waves that reflected the soft glow of the chamber. Tiny motes of light followed the ripples, bending and folding in intricate patterns as if acknowledging her presence. Persephone felt a gentle warmth spread through her hands as she moved them, a soft hum of life in rhythm with her own heartbeat. Hades moved closer, kneeling beside her. "Notice how everything connects," he said quietly. "Even here, every movement, however small, touches something else. The underworld is patient, but it remembers." Persephone leaned over the river, her reflection mingling with the glow of the lights beneath the surface. The water's shimmer bent softly with her movements, dancing and folding around her fingers. "It feels endless," she murmured. "Not like it will never end, but like it has always existed this way and will continue quietly, regardless of who is here." "Yes," Hades said, his gaze following the gentle arc of her hands. "Time here is not measured by sun or seasons. It moves in currents, in echoes, in gentle rhythms. Everything endures patiently." She let her hand hover above the water for a long moment, watching tiny creatures drift lazily beneath the surface. They were fragile, translucent, almost imperceptible, yet deliberate in their motion. Persephone's heart swelled slightly at their careful movements. Even in silence, there was life, and even in shadow, there was quiet activity. Hades observed her, noting the subtle fascination in her expression. She shifted, brushing her fingers lightly across the moss lining the riverbank. The soft texture pressed gently against her skin, adding warmth to the coolness of the water. She smiled faintly, feeling grounded in the chamber, part of the rhythm of the river and the quiet life it carried. "Do you think they notice us?" she asked, nodding toward the tiny drifting creatures. Hades shook his head slightly, smiling faintly. "They may not notice in the way we do, but they respond. Everything here responds in its own way." Presence is acknowledged quietly, without disturbance. Persephone watched the flow of the river, letting her eyes trace the shimmer of light as it moved along the surface. Each gentle bend carried reflections of the ceiling above, soft patterns etched in stone that curved like slow-moving clouds. She let herself lean closer, watching the overlapping arcs of light and shadow, feeling the calm settle deeper into her chest. The river curved toward a narrow archway on the far side of the chamber. Persephone stood, brushing her wet fingers along her robes, and stepped forward. The soft ripples followed her steps, faintly glimmering as if accompanying her. Hades moved beside her, offering a steady hand. She took it, feeling the calm pulse of his presence alongside the gentle rhythm of the river. As they followed the curve of the river, the walls of the chamber widened, revealing clusters of small, glowing plants that lined the banks. Their soft illumination blended with the shimmer of the river, creating a delicate pattern of light and shadow. Persephone knelt beside one cluster, letting her fingertips brush the faintly glowing leaves. Each leaf seemed to tremble slightly beneath her touch, delicate and alive, responding to her quiet attention. They bend, almost like they are breathing, she whispered. So gentle, so soft. Yes, Hades said softly. Even the smallest forms here have life, and each responds in its own rhythm. Nothing here is wasted, nothing is ignored. She traced a careful path along the riverbank, observing the way light and shadow merged with the soft currents of water. The tiny creatures beneath the surface drifted past her hands, their motion slow and deliberate, perfectly synchronized with the shimmer of the river. Persephone's fingers created overlapping ripples, the light folding and bending around each movement, creating new patterns that vanished as softly as they appeared. She leaned closer, watching the reflection of her own eyes in the water, mingling with the glow of the plants. The movement was subtle but constant, gentle but alive, a harmony of life that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her own breathing. Persephone felt a soft calm spread through her chest, a warm awareness of connection with the river, the chamber, and the quiet underworld around her. Hades watched silently, sensing the growing understanding in her gaze. Her attention was complete, her presence patient. The river responded with subtle shifts. The plants trembled gently, and the tiny creatures drifted in slow arcs, all in quiet harmony. Persephone finally rose, brushing damp strands of hair from her face. She glanced at Hades. "Shall we keep moving?" she asked softly, her voice calm but curious. He nodded, letting her hand linger in his for a moment longer. "Yes, there is always more to see. The river will guide us." They walked along the gentle curve of the water, stepping carefully on smooth stones and soft moss. The light shimmered around them, the faint echoes of water moving through the chamber, blending with the subtle hum of life. Persephone's heartbeat remained steady, in tune with the rhythm of the river, each step a gentle conversation with the flowing currents. The corridor ahead widened slightly, the shimmer of the river reflecting faint light onto the walls. Persephone paused for one last look at the water, letting its gentle flow imprint itself into her memory. Even in shadow, even in quiet, she realized there was life, movement, and beauty waiting for those who noticed. Hades extended his hand once more, and Persephone took it, stepping forward along the riverbank. The soft glimmer of water followed them, the gentle murmur of currents accompanying each step. Ahead, the river curved slowly toward a narrow, misted archway, inviting them deeper into the quiet, enduring pulse of the underworld. Persephone followed Hades along the winding riverbank, her footsteps careful and slow, listening to the gentle murmur of the currents. The mist curled around their ankles, soft and cool, carrying the faint scent of mineral water mixed with the subtle sweetness of distant blooms. Ahead, the corridor opened into a chamber unlike any they had yet encountered. Slender trees rose from the stone floor, their trunks pale and smooth, reaching toward a ceiling that seemed to vanish into soft shadows. Leaves shimmered faintly with the glow of hidden light, casting delicate, dancing patterns across the floor. The air was still, almost holding its breath, and Persephone felt a gentle pulse in the quiet, as though the space itself were breathing softly alongside her. Hades stepped beside her, his presence steady and calm. "This is the grove of quiet echoes," he said softly. "Every sound here lingers. Each movement resonates. It is a place of patience, of reflection, and subtle connection." Persephone crouched to touch the moss beneath one of the trees. Its texture was soft, like velvet dampened by morning dew, though no sun had touched it. She traced her fingers along the gentle curves of the roots, noticing the faint tremor of life running through them. Tiny motes of light drifted lazily around her, illuminating the edges of the moss and casting delicate reflections on the stone walls. "It feels alive," she whispered, leaning closer to the tree. "Not like the gardens above, but in its own way. Quiet but full." "Yes," Hades said, kneeling beside her. "Here, every presence matters, and every gesture leaves a trace." Even the softest sound contributes to the rhythm of the grove. Persephone listened. The faintest echoes of dripping water, a slight rustle of leaves, the gentle shift of light across the floor, all of it created a soft symphony that seemed to respond to her attention. She let her fingers linger in the moss, tracing slow patterns along the roots. Each movement sent faint tremors through the ground, subtle vibrations that seemed to ripple outward, meeting the echoes of distant sounds. A small creature emerged from between the roots, translucent and delicate. It moved carefully, pausing to observe Persephone, its tiny body reflecting the soft glow of the chamber. She held still, allowing it to approach. The creature brushed lightly against her hand, leaving a warmth that traveled slowly up her arm. Persephone smiled faintly, her breath slow and measured, feeling a deep calm settle in her chest. Hades watched quietly, sensing the way her attention aligned with the grove. "You notice what many overlook," he said softly. "That is why it responds to you. Life here acknowledges those who move gently, with care and presence." Persephone leaned back slightly, letting her gaze wander upward to the delicate canopy of shimmering leaves. Light bent and folded through the foliage, scattering across the trunks and floor in soft patterns. She reached a hand toward the drifting light, and it hovered briefly, trembling like a tiny flame, then moved along her fingers in a slow, deliberate arc. "It is so delicate," she whispered. "I can feel everything. The trees, the moss, the light, even the echoes." "Yes," Hades said. "All things here are connected. Every sound, every movement, every gentle shift has its place. Even absence has meaning, if you notice." Persephone crouched by a shallow pool, nestled among the roots. The water reflected the faint glow of leaves above, creating overlapping patterns that rippled with her movements. She traced the edges with her fingers, watching the delicate shapes merge and fold with each small disturbance. Tiny, translucent creatures drifted past her hands, moving in harmony with the soft echoes of the chamber. Hades knelt beside her, letting his hand hover near the water without touching it. "Notice how even the smallest ripple carries influence," he said. "It bends light, shifts currents, and awakens subtle responses in the creatures that dwell here. Nothing is separate. Nothing is insignificant." Persephone smiled faintly, brushing her fingers along the surface of the pool. The water trembled, sending faint arcs of light across the roots and moss, mingling with the drifting glow from above. Each movement seemed to create a conversation between her presence and the quiet life of the grove. She leaned closer, feeling the gentle pulse of the chamber align with her heartbeat, slow and steady, patient and unhurried. A breeze drifted through the grove, soft and warm, rustling the shimmering leaves and carrying the faint scent of blossoms. Persephone closed her eyes briefly, letting the sound of moving foliage and trickling water fill her senses. When she opened them, she noticed subtle shapes moving among the shadows, tiny, delicate forms weaving along the trunks and roots, invisible at first, but alive in the soft light. Hades reached for her hand. Persephone took it, stepping carefully along the mossy floor. The tiny creature shifted, allowing her passage without disturbance, their movements blending with the soft rhythm of the grove. She glanced at him, a quiet smile in her eyes. "It feels like the grove knows I am here," she whispered. "Like it responds without speaking, without noise, just gently acknowledging me." "Yes," Hades said. "It recognizes presence and care. Nothing else matters here. Time flows differently. Movements, attention, and quiet thought are what shape the groove's rhythm." Persephone wandered slowly along the edges of the pool, her fingertips tracing gentle patterns in the water. Each ripple caught the light differently, bending and merging with reflections of the shimmering leaves. Tiny motes drifted around her hands, folding and glimmering in delicate arcs. She bent closer to observe them, marveling at the quiet interconnection of the chamber's life. "It is so still, yet so alive," she murmured. "Like every detail is waiting for someone to notice." Hades moved beside her, kneeling by a cluster of roots. He traced a slow arc with his fingers across the moss, watching the faint tremor it created in the air and water. "That is the nature of the underworld," he said softly. "It waits patiently. It holds everything, gently, without hurry. And when someone moves carefully through it, it responds." Persephone rose, brushing her hands along her robes. She stepped lightly among the slender trunks, watching the soft shadows shift and ripple in harmony with her movements. The faint echoes of distant water and soft rustling leaves created a gentle symphony, the sound so delicate it was almost felt rather than heard. A narrow corridor appeared at the far side of the grove, lit faintly by the soft shimmer of minerals embedded in the stone. Persephone glanced at Hades, her eyes reflecting the warm glow of the chamber. "Shall we continue?" she whispered. Hades nodded, letting her hand linger in his for a heartbeat longer. "Yes, there is more to discover. The grove has shared its quiet rhythm with you, but the underworld moves patiently ahead." Persephone stepped forward, guided by the gentle glow of leaves, the soft ripple of water, and the faint, patient hum of life. Each step was deliberate, her fingers brushing the moss and roots, her eyes tracing the delicate arcs of light across the floor. The echoes of the grove followed them, soft and enduring, carrying the rhythm of quiet life as they moved toward the corridor beyond. The chamber stretched behind them, still alive with gentle pulses of light and sound, while the path ahead promised new discoveries, patient and calm, waiting to reveal themselves to those willing to notice. Persephone felt the subtle warmth of the grove settle deep into her chest, a quiet, enduring reminder of the delicate balance and quiet beauty that flowed through every part of this gentle world. Persephone stepped through the narrow archway at the far end of the grove of quiet echoes, her fingers brushing the smooth stone edges as mist curled softly around her ankles. The chamber ahead opened gradually into a wide, serene space. Water stretched across the floor in shallow pools, each one reflecting faint mineral light that shimmered gently across the ceiling and walls. The air smelled faintly of earth and moss, with a delicate hint of blossoms floating somewhere just out of reach. Persephone knelt at the edge of one pool, letting her fingers touch the water. It was cool and still, almost like glass, and the gentle pulse of light beneath its surface seemed to respond to her presence. Tiny ripples formed with each movement of her hand, bending the faint glow and sending soft patterns across the surrounding stone. Hades stepped beside her, silent and steady, his robe brushing the floor. "These are the still waters," he said softly. "They reflect more than light. They mirror attention, patience, and presence." Persephone watched the water shimmer and bend around her fingertips. Small, translucent creatures drifted lazily beneath the surface, their movements so slow and deliberate they seemed almost suspended in time. She leaned closer, marveling at the gentle harmony between the water, the light, and the subtle forms beneath. "It feels like the water is listening," she whispered. "Not in words, but it notices." "Yes," Hades replied, kneeling beside her. "Every small gesture, every touch, every careful movement matters here. Even silence carries influence." She dipped her hand further, letting the water curl around her wrist. The light shifted with the gentle movement, casting soft arcs across the nearby moss and the bases of slender stone columns that rose like tiny trunks from the pools. The reflections merged with faint glimmers of mineral veins in the walls, creating intricate patterns of light and shadow that shifted and folded with every ripple. Persephone smiled faintly, feeling a warm calm settle in her chest. "Even in stillness, there is life," she murmured. "It's so soft, so gentle, yet alive." Hades nodded. Patience and presence reveal subtle life that often goes unnoticed. The garden holds was quiet, waiting for careful eyes and hands to perceive it. She traced small arcs along the water's surface with her fingers, watching ripples fold and merge. The tiny creatures beneath her hands responded to the disturbance, shifting their slow paths to follow the motion before returning to their gentle drift. The pattern of movement was quiet, deliberate, like a conversation carried through water and light. A faint breeze drifted through the chamber, curling softly across the surface of the pools. It carried the scent of unseen flowers, delicate and almost imperceptible. Persephone closed her eyes briefly, letting the gentle pulse of air and the shimmer of water fill her senses. When she opened them, she noticed a subtle glow forming near the center of the largest pool, a soft, golden light that shimmered like a reflection of distant sun through morning mist. Hades stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on the edge of the pool. "That light forms where attention lingers," he said softly. "It responds to presence, curiosity, and care. Nothing here exists without connection." Persephone leaned closer to the glowing center, watching as the light curved and swirled, blending with the faint reflections of mineral veins along the walls. Tiny ripples moved across the surface, bending the glow into patterns she could not predict but could admire fully. Each shift seemed deliberate, yet perfectly natural, as though the water itself moved with intention born from patience. She dipped her fingertips into the golden shimmer, letting the warmth spread slowly through her hand. The tiny creatures beneath the surface paused briefly, then resumed their gentle drift, moving in harmony with the ripples she created. Persephone felt a soft sense of intimacy with the chamber, as though she were part of the subtle rhythm that held it together. Hades knelt beside her, his eyes reflecting the faint glow. "The still waters teach the importance of noticing," he said quietly. "Life moves differently here. Every ripple, every shimmer, every small gesture contributes to the quiet balance." Persephone smiled faintly, watching the soft interaction of light, water, and movement. "It feels endless," she whispered. "Not that it will never end, but that it exists independently, patiently, waiting for someone to notice." "Yes," Hades said. "It endures because it is patient, because it responds carefully, because it honors each presence, no matter how small." She rose slowly, brushing damp strands of hair from her face, and walked along the edge of the pool. The soft moss beneath her feet pressed gently against her soles, warm and comforting. Tiny creatures shifted in the shallow water as she passed, gliding with the gentle current created by her steps. She bent slightly to observe their slow, deliberate movements, her breath calm and even, aligning naturally with the rhythm of the chamber. Hades followed, keeping his hand lightly on the moss beside her, guiding her without words. The soft reflection of the pools and mineral veins danced across her robes as she moved, and Persephone felt a growing sense of connection with the space. Each step, each gesture, each gentle touch seemed to resonate across the water and moss, sending subtle vibrations through the chamber. She paused near a cluster of tiny glowing plants rising from the shallow edge of the pools. Their faint light bent delicately around her fingers as she brushed the leaves. "Even here," she whispered, "everything bends toward care, toward presence." "Yes," Hades said softly. "The garden moves with patience. It mirrors the attention you give it, and it responds in kind. Nothing is lost, nothing overlooked." Persephone leaned closer to the water, watching the light fold and ripple in intricate patterns. Tiny creatures drifted past her hands, adjusting their paths as if dancing in harmony with the shimmer of reflections. She let her fingers hover above the surface, watching ripples overlap and merge, feeling a calm pulse spread through her chest. She glanced at Hades, her eyes reflecting the soft glow. "It feels like part of me belongs here," she whispered. "Like I am just another ripple in the quiet rhythm." "Yes," Hades said softly. "And in noticing it, you become part of the rhythm. That is the gift of presence. That is why it endures." They continued along the moss-lined edge of the pools, stepping lightly over small stones and patches of moss. The soft shimmer of water and light followed them like a quiet companion. Persephone's footsteps were deliberate, careful, aligning naturally with the slow pulse of the chamber. The golden glow in the center of the largest pool bent gently with each step, creating soft, fleeting patterns that danced across walls and water alike. The corridor ahead narrowed gradually, fading into shadows that shimmered faintly with mineral light. Persephone glanced at Hades, a quiet curiosity in her eyes. "Shall we go on?" she asked softly. Hades nodded, offering his hand. She took it, feeling the warmth of his presence alongside the calm rhythm of the water and moss. Step by step, they moved toward the next chamber, leaving the pools behind, yet carrying the subtle pulse of the garden with them, patient, enduring, and quietly alive. Persephone stepped carefully through the narrowing corridor, her hand brushing along the smooth stone walls. The soft shimmer of mineral veins glowed faintly beneath her fingertips, casting gentle, wavering light along the path. The air grew warmer as she walked, carrying a faint scent of something sweet and earthy, like dried leaves resting in sunlight, though no sun had ever touched this place. The corridor opened into a chamber bathed in a warm, amber glow. Small flames danced along the edges of shallow braziers carved directly from the stone, their flickering light reflecting in gentle patterns on the walls and ceiling. The flames were tiny, delicate, and contained, more like soft lanterns than fire. They seemed to hover and pulse, almost breathing in rhythm with the quiet of the room. Persephone crouched beside one, letting her fingers hover above the small flame. It trembled gently, bending slightly toward her touch without burning, casting a comforting warmth across her skin. She watched, fascinated, as the light flickered across the walls in intricate patterns, folding softly over the veins of the stone. Hades stepped beside her, kneeling on the smooth floor. "These are the gentle flames," he said softly. "They do not demand. They do not consume. They respond to presence, attention, and care." She leaned closer, her eyes following the tiny arcs of light dancing in the shadows. "It feels alive," she whispered. "Not like fire above ground, but in its own quiet way. Each flicker, each movement, it seems aware." "Yes," Hades said. "Even here, the smallest life responds. The flame exists in harmony with its surroundings, gentle and patient. It mirrors subtle motions and intentions, showing care in return for care." Persephone extended her hand slowly, letting the warmth brush against her palm. The flame trembled slightly, folding softly against her presence. She watched the flickering light ripple across the floor, tracing delicate arcs over the moss patches and the edges of other small fires. Tiny motes of illumination drifted from flame to flame, weaving slowly through the chamber like quiet dancers, their motion soft and deliberate. "It is so calm," Persephone whispered. "Even though it moves, it does not demand attention. It simply exists, beautifully." Hades nodded, observing the way her gaze lingered on the flames. "Life here moves differently. Patience is measured not by urgency, but by awareness. Every movement, every presence, every gesture contributes to the gentle rhythm of the underworld." She crouched by another flame, dipping a hand near it. The warmth spread slowly across her skin without burning, a soft, comforting sensation that made her feel rooted in the chamber. She watched the reflections of light on the smooth walls and ceiling, tracing their movement with her eyes. Each flicker seemed like a conversation with the stone itself, bending and folding as it responded to the smallest change in her presence. A faint rustle drew her attention to the edge of the chamber, where tiny, translucent creatures drifted among the flames. They moved deliberately, weaving around the flickering light, their forms reflecting and refracting the amber glow. Persephone held still, letting them pass, marveling at the harmony of the movement. "They notice me," she whispered softly. "Not in a loud way, but in a quiet, careful way. They move with me, around me." "Yes," Hades said. "Even the smallest presences here are aware. Everything responds gently to attention and patience. Nothing is wasted, nothing ignored." Persephone's fingers hovered above a tiny flame. She traced soft arcs in the air, and the light bent and swirled along her movements. She leaned closer, watching the reflections dance along the walls, the floor, and the ceiling. The patterns merged with the faint veins of minerals in the stone, creating delicate waves of illumination that seemed endless. The warmth of the chamber seeped into her chest, a slow, steady calm that moved along with the rhythm of the flames. She took a soft breath, closing her eyes briefly and letting the warmth settle into her skin. When she opened them, she noticed the faintest shapes among the shadows, tiny, almost invisible forms drifting carefully between the braziers. Their motion was slow, deliberate, synchronized with the gentle flicker of the flames. Hades reached for her hand, letting her take it, and together they moved through the chamber. Persephone stepped carefully over patches of moss and smooth stone, watching the flames bend slightly toward each footfall. Tiny motes of light rose gently from the fire, drifting lazily around her hands, their motion synchronized with each delicate movement she made. "It feels like everything here listens," she whispered. "The moss, the fire, the shadows, even the small creatures. They all notice how I move, how I breathe." "Yes," Hades said softly. "Presence carries weight here, but it is gentle. Every ripple of attention, every soft step, every quiet gesture shapes the rhythm of this place. The flames honor that." Persephone leaned closer to a larger brazier, letting the warmth wash over her face. She traced a slow arc over the fire with her hand, and the flame folded softly around her movements. Small motes drifted up from the brazier, moving delicately into the amber glow of the chamber, weaving around her fingers. She marveled at the subtle interplay of light, warmth, and motion, feeling a quiet connection to every small presence in the space. Hades watched her closely, noting the way she moved and observed. The chamber mirrors careful attention, he said. It is patient, enduring, and responsive. Every gesture, every quiet breath is reflected here, gently. Persephone traced gentle circles with her fingers above the flickering flames, watching them fold, bend, and shimmer along the walls. The tiny creatures glided around the light in soft arcs, responding to each movement with subtle adjustments. She felt a warm calm settle deeper into her chest, the rhythm of the chamber aligning with her heartbeat, slow and steady. She glanced at Hades, a quiet curiosity in her eyes. "It feels endless," she whispered. "Like each flame carries a story, waiting quietly for someone to notice." "Yes," Hades said softly. "Each story exists in patience. Each presence contributes to the quiet rhythm of the underworld. Even here, in flame and shadow, life is held gently, enduringly." Persephone rose slowly, brushing damp strands of hair from her face, and stepped lightly through the chamber. The small flames flickered with each movement, bending their light toward her, guiding her path without demand or urgency. The tiny motes of illumination drifted along her shoulders and hands, tracing arcs of quiet light. A narrow corridor appeared at the far side of the chamber, faintly glowing with embedded mineral veins. Persephone glanced at Hades, her eyes reflecting the soft amber glow. "Shall we continue?" she asked softly. He nodded, offering his hand. She took it, feeling warmth and steadiness in his presence alongside the calm rhythm of the chamber. Step by step, they moved toward the next part of the underworld, leaving the gentle flames behind, yet carrying the quiet pulse and enduring patience of the chamber with them. Persephone followed Hades through the corridor, her steps slow and deliberate, the soft glow of embedded mineral veins guiding their path. The mist curled gently around their ankles, carrying a faint, earthy scent mixed with the subtle warmth of distant fires. Ahead, the corridor widened into a large hall, and Persephone paused at its entrance, taking in the scene before her. Shadows stretched across the floor and walls, long and delicate, folding into one another in gentle layers. The light was soft, coming from small, embedded crystals that shimmered faintly like morning dew. It was a place of quiet, where movement was reflected and repeated, and every gesture seemed to leave a lingering echo. Persephone stepped inside, her fingers brushing lightly against the cool stone walls as she moved forward. Hades walked beside her, his presence steady, guiding without words. "This is the Hall of Soft Shadows," he said quietly. "Every movement here creates a trace. The shadows respond, fold, and drift in harmony with those who enter." Persephone lowered herself to the floor, letting her fingers hover above the surface. The shadows bent gently toward her touch, stretching and curling as though recognizing her presence. Tiny motes of light floated through the air, drifting lazily along the curves of the shifting darkness. She leaned closer, marveling at the intricate dance of shadow and light, each fold and curl moving in subtle patterns that felt alive. "It feels like the shadows breathe," she whispered softly. "They fold and shift without effort, as if they know I am here." "Yes," Hades said, kneeling beside her. "They move with awareness. Even in darkness, attention brings life. Every gesture leaves its mark, no matter how gentle." Persephone traced arcs with her fingertips above the floor, watching the shadows ripple and extend in soft waves. Tiny creatures, delicate and translucent, glided along the shifting forms, their slow movement perfectly synchronized with the folds of shadow. She let her hands hover for a long moment, feeling the subtle pulse of the hall settle into her chest. A faint breeze drifted through the hall, curling around her hair and robes. It carried a faint, floral scent that mingled with the earthy aroma of stone. Persephone closed her eyes briefly, letting the gentle movement of air and shadow fill her senses. When she opened them, she noticed subtle shapes moving among the darker corners, tiny, careful forms drifting along the walls, moving without disturbance, blending seamlessly with the soft patterns of light and shadow. Hades reached for her hand. She took it, stepping carefully along the stone floor. The shadows shifted gently with each movement, bending and folding around her, creating delicate arcs of darkness and light that rippled across the hall. She glanced at him, a quiet smile in her eyes. "It feels like everything here listens," she whispered. "The walls, the shadows, even the light, everything responds softly, without noise, without demand." "Yes," Hades said softly. Attention, care, and patience shape the hall. Each movement is mirrored, every gesture acknowledged. Nothing is lost, nothing ignored. Persephone bent closer to the floor, observing the interaction of shadow and light in more detail. The motes of illumination drifted lazily across the surface, tracing arcs along the folds of darkness. Tiny creatures glided around her hands, responding to the movements she made in the air above the floor. Each ripple seemed like a delicate conversation, subtle but present. She traced gentle circles with her fingers above a particularly dark fold, and the shadow responded, stretching and twisting in intricate patterns. The tiny motes of light danced along the surface, glimmering faintly against the muted darkness. Persephone leaned closer, feeling a soft warmth rise in her chest. The hall seemed to acknowledge her presence, offering quiet, deliberate responses that were both gentle and persistent. Hades observed her closely, noting the focus in her expression and the calm alignment of her breathing with the rhythm of the shadows. "The hall teaches patience," he said softly. "Even in darkness, life responds when attention is offered. Shadows are patient. They bend, fold, and endure. They wait for a careful presence." Persephone smiled faintly, watching the interplay of light and darkness. "It feels endless," she whispered. "Like every shadow, every ripple, every tiny movement carries meaning, quietly waiting to be noticed." "Yes," Hades replied. "Presence matters. Even here, where shadows fold and drift, life is reflected and preserved. Every small gesture shapes the quiet rhythm of the hall." She rose slowly, brushing her hands lightly over the smooth stone walls. The shadows bent gently around her movement, folding and stretching without effort. Tiny motes of light drifted along her fingers and robes, tracing arcs that lingered momentarily before fading into the soft darkness. Each movement felt deliberate yet entirely natural, a reflection of the patient balance that held the chamber together. Persephone stepped along the floor, her feet pressing gently into soft patches of moss that grew in small clusters along the edges of the hall. The moss trembled faintly beneath her touch, vibrating in subtle resonance with the shifting shadows. She bent closer to observe it, marveling at the quiet harmony of forms, each responding in its own gentle rhythm. Hades followed, keeping his hand lightly on the moss beside her. "Every presence contributes," he said softly. "Even the smallest touch, even the gentlest movement, shapes the rhythm of this place. Shadows, moss, light, they all respond delicately, patiently." Persephone's fingers hovered above a dark curve in the floor where shadows pooled most deeply. She traced small arcs in the air, watching the darkness fold and twist in harmony with her gestures. Tiny motes of light drifted up from the stone, reflecting the folds and ripples in soft patterns. She felt the gentle pulse of the hall align with her own breathing, slow and steady, patient and enduring. She glanced at Hades, her eyes reflecting the faint glow of motes and crystals. "It feels like part of me belongs here," she whispered. "Like I'm just another ripple in the quiet rhythm of the shadows." "Yes," Hades said softly. "And in noticing, you become part of the rhythm." That is the lesson of the hall. Even in quiet darkness, life exists, waiting for careful attention. Step by step, they continued along the hall, the shadows bending and folding with each movement. Tiny creatures drifted along the edges, gliding in delicate arcs, responding to the soft shifts in light and shadow. Persephone's breath remained calm, her heartbeat slow, in tune with the patient rhythm of the chamber. A narrow corridor appeared at the far end, lit faintly by mineral veins embedded in the stone. Persephone glanced at Hades, a quiet curiosity in her eyes. "Shall we go on?" she asked softly. He nodded, offering his hand. She took it, feeling the steady warmth of his presence alongside the quiet pulse of the hall. Step by step, they moved toward the next chamber, leaving the soft shadows behind, yet carrying their gentle rhythm and patient endurance with them. Persephone followed Hades through the narrow corridor, her steps soft and careful. The faint glow of embedded minerals illuminated the walls in subtle, wavering arcs, reflecting gently on the mist curling around their ankles. The air here was cooler, carrying the earthy scent of damp stone and moss. Every breath felt deliberate, as if the cavern itself asked for attention in the softest of ways. Ahead, the passage opened into a wide chamber filled with stones of all shapes and sizes. Smooth pebbles covered the floor, and larger boulders were scattered carefully along the edges, their surfaces faintly luminescent. Some stones shimmered with pale green, others with muted amber, and a few with soft bluish tints. Each emitted a gentle warmth, faint and comforting, like the memory of sunlight after a long night. Persephone knelt beside one of the stones, letting her fingers brush over its surface. The texture was smooth, cool, yet alive with subtle warmth that seemed to pulse in a quiet rhythm. Tiny motes of light drifted lazily along its edges, folding and reflecting the stone's natural shimmer. She pressed her palm lightly against it and felt a gentle vibration, like the heartbeat of the cavern itself. Hades crouched beside her, watching her movements quietly. "These are the quiet stones," he said softly. "They carry memories. Each touch, each step, each presence leaves a subtle trace. The stones remember." Persephone traced slow arcs along the surface, marveling at the delicate response. "It feels like they are listening," she whispered. "Not like they speak, but they know." "Yes," Hades said. "Even without words, everything here carries a presence. The stones, the light, the air, they hold the rhythm of care and attention. Patience is their gift." She leaned closer to a cluster of small bluish stones, letting her fingers hover above them. The stones pulsed faintly, their glow bending toward her hands. Tiny creatures, translucent and delicate, drifted along their edges, moving in slow, harmonious arcs. Persephone watched them for a long moment, feeling the subtle connection of every element in the chamber: the stones, the motes of light, the gentle creatures, and her own calm presence. "It is so still," she whispered softly. "Yet it feels alive, like it remembers everything quietly." "Yes," Hades said. "Life in the underworld endures through awareness. Every gesture matters, and every careful movement leaves a gentle mark. The stones reflect that, quietly, endlessly." Persephone pressed her palm against one of the larger boulders. The warmth spread slowly through her hand, faint but comforting, like a soft pulse beneath her skin. She traced slow circles, observing the way the stones shifted their glow in response. Tiny motes of light drifted along the edges, creating delicate, shimmering arcs that folded softly across the cavern floor. A faint breeze drifted through the chamber, curling gently around her hair and robes. It carried the subtle scent of earth, stone, and distant moss, mixing into a fragrance that was calming, steady, and grounding. Persephone closed her eyes briefly, letting the quiet pulse of the cavern settle deep into her chest. When she opened them, she noticed subtle shapes moving between the stones, tiny, delicate forms drifting carefully, folding and weaving with the shimmer of the stones. Hades extended his hand. Persephone took it, feeling his steady warmth alongside the calm rhythm of the cavern. Together, they walked slowly along the scattered boulders, careful not to disturb the delicate creatures that glided among the stones. Each step was deliberate, echoing softly against the smooth floor, creating gentle ripples in the faint light and subtle vibrations in the stones themselves. "It feels like everything here honors care," she whispered. "The stones, the light, even the creatures, all respond softly to gentle presence." "Yes," Hades said quietly. "The cavern remembers patience. It endures because it waits. Every touch, every glance, every careful step leaves a trace. The quiet here is alive with attention." Persephone crouched near a patch of moss growing between two boulders. The moss trembled faintly under her fingers, responding to the soft pressure with tiny ripples, as if acknowledging her care. She leaned closer, brushing gently along the edges, observing the delicate motion of tiny motes drifting along the moss. Each movement felt deliberate, purposeful, and harmoniously aligned with the slow pulse of the cavern. She glanced at Hades, a quiet curiosity in her eyes. "It feels like part of me belongs here," she murmured. "Like my presence is woven into the rhythm of the stones." "Yes," Hades replied softly. "In noticing, you become part of their memory. Each step, each gentle touch, contributes to the quiet pulse of the chamber. You were part of its rhythm, patient and enduring. Persephone rose slowly, letting her fingers hover above a small cluster of greenish stones. The faint glow bent softly toward her, tracing arcs along her hands and robes. Tiny creatures glided among the stones, drifting in synchronized motion, responding subtly to her attention. She stepped carefully across the pebble-covered floor, feeling the warmth and pulse of the stones beneath her feet, each one contributing a quiet, patient resonance. Hades followed, letting his hand brush lightly along the moss and stones at the edges of their path. Every gesture, every moment, leaves a mark, he said softly. Even in quietness, life endures. Every careful presence matters. Persephone paused near a larger boulder, watching the way the soft light bent across its surface, folding and reflecting in intricate patterns. She dipped a hand near the edge of a shallow pool forming beside it. The water was still and cool, yet it carried faint vibrations from the stones beneath. Tiny translucent creatures drifted past her fingers, moving slowly, deliberately, as if dancing in time with the pulse of the cavern. It feels endless, she whispered, like every stone, every ripple, every shimmer carries memory quietly, waiting for someone to notice. Yes, Hades said softly. Presence is its own gift. The stones, the creatures, the moss. They endure because they are observed carefully. Every gesture is acknowledged, even in silence. Step by step, they continued through the cavern, the subtle glow of the stones bending with their movements. Tiny motes of light drifted along their path, weaving around their hands and robes. Persephone's heartbeat remained calm, in tune with the patient rhythm of the cavern. A narrow corridor appeared at the far end of the chamber, softly lit by mineral veins embedded in the walls. Persephone glanced at Hades, her eyes reflecting the gentle light. "Shall we go on?" she asked softly. He nodded, offering his hand. She took it, feeling his steady warmth alongside the quiet pulse of the stones. Step by step, they moved toward the next part of the underworld, leaving the cavern behind yet carrying its subtle rhythm and enduring calm with them. Persephone followed Hades as the narrow corridor widened again, the soft glow of minerals tracing delicate arcs along the walls. The air had grown damp and cool, carrying a faint, fresh scent that reminded her of rain on stone. Mist curled lazily along the floor, and the faint sound of moving water drifted toward her from somewhere ahead. The path opened into a chamber dominated by a single, graceful bridge spanning a shallow, slow-flowing stream. The water shimmered faintly, reflecting the soft light from stones embedded in the cavern walls. It was clear and calm, moving in a gentle, deliberate rhythm, carrying the subtle scent of earth and moss. The bridge itself was carved from pale stone, smooth and warm to the touch, arching gracefully over the water like a gentle invitation to cross. Persephone approached the edge of the stream, kneeling to let her fingers hover above the surface. The water rippled softly beneath her touch, bending the reflections of mineral light into arcs of delicate shimmer. Tiny translucent creatures drifted along the currents, their movements slow and harmonious, as if guided by the gentle flow of the stream. Hades knelt beside her, his presence steady and calm. "This is the bridge of whispering waters," he said softly. "Every ripple, every motion, every passing presence carries its echo. The water remembers and responds." Persephone traced arcs along the water's surface, watching ripples fold and merge. "It feels like it listens," she whispered. "Like it knows I am here." "Yes," Hades said. "Even the smallest gesture shapes the water's rhythm. It responds to care, attention, and patience. Nothing is hurried here." She dipped her fingertips further, letting the water curl around them. The gentle pulse of movement spread across the surface, reflecting in faint patterns along the pale stone of the bridge. The tiny creatures beneath her hands drifted gracefully, following the motion of ripples, then resuming their slow, deliberate path. A soft breeze drifted through the chamber, carrying the faint scent of distant flowers and moss. Persephone closed her eyes briefly, feeling the rhythm of water, light, and air align with her own heartbeat. When she opened them, she noticed the soft shimmer of mineral light reflecting in arcs across the water, bending in harmony with each ripple she created. Hades extended his hand. Persephone took it, feeling his warmth steady her as she rose to step onto the bridge. Her feet pressed carefully along the smooth stone, each movement sending subtle vibrations through the structure. The water below seemed to respond in kind, rippling softly and bending the reflections in gentle, flowing patterns. It feels like the bridge is alive, she whispered, glancing down at the shimmering currents. Like every step carries its own quiet echo. Yes, Hades said softly. The bridge, the water, the creatures within, they all respond to attention. Every movement is mirrored in quiet ways, patiently, endlessly. Persephone continued across the bridge, stepping carefully along its curve. Tiny motes of light drifted along the edges of the stone, following the rhythm of her motion. She let her hand hover above the smooth railing, feeling a faint warmth radiate through her fingertips. Each subtle touch created a ripple, bending the reflections of light and water into delicate, shifting arcs. Hades followed silently, his presence grounding her movements. Even the gentlest presence matters, he said softly. Every ripple, every touch, every step contributes to the rhythm of the water. The bridge endures because it responds patiently, deliberately. Persephone paused at the midpoint of the arch, looking down at the shallow stream. Tiny creatures glided beneath her fingers, moving slowly and harmoniously with the gentle current. The water bent around their movements in soft patterns, creating intricate reflections on the smooth stone below. She leaned closer, fascinated by the quiet interplay of life, motion, and light. It feels endless, she whispered. Like the water holds every gesture, every ripple, every movement quietly, waiting to be noticed. Yes, Hades replied. Presence is its own gift. The water endures, just as attention endures. Each ripple, each soft movement, leaves a mark, gentle but lasting. Persephone bent closer, dipping a hand into the stream. The water curled gently around her wrist, warm and cool at the same time, sending a faint pulse through her arm. Tiny creatures drifted past, adjusting their paths with subtle care, moving in harmony with the ripple of her fingers. She felt the rhythm of the water align with her own heartbeat, steady and patient. Hades watched her closely, noting the alignment of her breathing with the pulse of the chamber. The water mirrors attention, he said softly. Even the quietest gesture is observed and returned in kind. Patience and presence shape the flow here. Persephone rose slowly, letting her fingertips hover above the shimmering currents. She took a deep breath, allowing the cool, gentle mist and faint warmth of the bridge to seep into her chest. The tiny motes of light drifted along her hands and robes, tracing arcs that bent gently over the flowing water. She felt connected to the subtle rhythm of the chamber, part of its quiet, enduring pulse. She glanced at Hades, a soft curiosity in her eyes. It feels like part of me belongs here, she whispered. Like I am another ripple in the quiet flow of this place. Yes, Hades said softly. Every presence matters. Every careful step, every gentle gesture becomes part of the rhythm. That is the gift of noticing, of patience. Step by step, they continued along the bridge, the water and light bending softly with their movements. Tiny creatures drifted along the current, moving in delicate arcs, responding to the subtle shifts in ripple and reflection. Persephone's breathing remained calm, her heartbeat slow, in tune with the enduring rhythm of the chamber. At the far end of the bridge, a narrow corridor appeared, its walls faintly glowing with embedded mineral veins. Persephone glanced at Hades, a quiet anticipation in her eyes. "Shall we go on?" she asked softly. He nodded, offering his hand. She took it, feeling his warmth and steadiness alongside the gentle pulse of water and light. Step by step, they moved toward the next chamber, leaving the whispering waters behind, yet carrying their quiet rhythm and patient endurance with them. Persephone stepped carefully into the new chamber, the narrow corridor opening into a space that seemed alive with quiet movement. The air smelled faintly of earth and damp moss, soft and comforting. Around her, thin shafts of mineral light illuminated delicate, pale leaves that hung silently from invisible branches, swaying gently without a breeze. Each leaf glimmered faintly, as if catching light from somewhere far beyond the cavern walls. Hades walked beside her, his presence steady. "This is the grove of silent leaves," he said softly. "They move with patience and presence. They notice every step, every gesture, every breath. Everything here responds quietly." Persephone knelt among the leaves, letting her fingers hover just above their surfaces. The leaves trembled faintly, bending and twisting in delicate arcs as though acknowledging her presence. Tiny translucent creatures drifted among them, gliding slowly, moving in perfect harmony with the gentle sway. She watched the intricate dance, marveling at the subtle, deliberate motion of light, leaf, and creature. "They feel alive," she whispered. "Not loud, not urgent, but aware." "Yes," Hades said softly. "Even in silence, there is life. Every gentle motion, every careful presence, shapes the rhythm here. Patience is reflected in everything you see." Persephone extended a hand toward a cluster of leaves. They trembled slightly, folding around her fingers without touch, bending with subtle precision. The tiny creatures glided through the arcs of light, following the folds of the leaves in soft, deliberate patterns. She leaned closer, feeling the faint pulse of energy beneath her fingertips, a quiet, steady warmth. A soft glow rose from the base of the invisible branches, illuminating the mossy floor in intricate patterns. Persephone brushed her hand lightly across the moss. It quivered faintly under her touch, a subtle resonance that spread through the chamber in harmony with the gentle sway of the leaves. She felt the calm pulse of the grove align with her own breath, slow and steady, each inhale and exhale echoing the rhythm of the silent life around her. Hades crouched beside her, observing the way her attention lingered on each small detail. "The grove honors presence," he said. "Every gesture, no matter how small, leaves a trace. Even silence is acknowledged." Persephone smiled faintly, watching the intricate arcs of light folding over leaves, moss, and tiny creatures. "It feels endless," she whispered. "Like every movement, every ripple of attention, every quiet gesture is remembered." "Yes," Hades said softly. "Even in quiet, there is continuity. Every step matters. Every careful touch contributes to the gentle rhythm that carries through the grove." She let her hand hover above the surface of a small moss-covered stone, watching the way the leaves bent slightly toward it. The creatures drifted around the arcs of light, their translucent bodies reflecting the soft glow in shifting patterns. Each ripple of movement seemed deliberate, yet entirely natural, a reflection of patient, quiet harmony. Persephone traced soft circles with her fingers above the leaves, observing how they curved and swayed, bending in subtle, elegant arcs. The motes of light that floated through the grove followed her gestures, tracing delicate paths that shimmered against moss, stone, and leaf. She felt a quiet warmth rise in her chest, a steady, calm pulse that aligned with the gentle rhythm of the chamber. Hades reached for her hand, letting her take it, and together they moved slowly through the grove. Persephone stepped carefully over patches of moss and along the edges of pale stones. Each movement sent tiny ripples through the leaves, causing them to fold and shimmer, bending light softly across the chamber. Tiny creatures drifted alongside their path, weaving in and out of the arcs of light in perfect synchrony with every step. "It feels like part of me belongs here," Persephone whispered. "Like I am woven into the rhythm of the grove, another ripple in its gentle pulse." "Yes," Hades replied softly. "Every presence contributes. Every careful gesture shapes the rhythm. Even silence leaves its mark, delicate but enduring." Persephone crouched beside a small cluster of leaves, letting her hand hover above them. They bent slowly, following her movements in arcs that reflected the faint glow from the mineral veins. Tiny creatures drifted among the leaves, adjusting their paths to maintain harmony with the soft folds. She leaned closer, feeling the pulse of the grove deepen in her chest, a slow, steady warmth that settled like a quiet breath. A soft rustle drew her attention to the far edge of the chamber, where a shallow pool glimmered faintly under the pale light. She stepped carefully toward it, the leaves bending gently with her approach. The water reflected the delicate arcs of light and the subtle sway of the leaves, creating intricate, ever-changing patterns. She knelt beside the pool, letting her fingers hover above the surface. The water trembled faintly, bending in gentle ripples as though responding to the attention of the grove itself. Hades crouched beside her. "Everything here responds," he said quietly. "The water, the moss, the leaves, the creatures, all bend and fold with care. Even the smallest presence is acknowledged." Persephone dipped her fingers into the water, letting it curl around her wrists without resistance. The tiny creatures drifted past, moving in slow, deliberate paths, following the arcs of light and water. She felt the calm pulse of the grove deepen further, aligning with her breathing. Every inhale and exhale mirrored the gentle rhythm of the leaves, the moss, the stones, and the creatures drifting through the chamber. She glanced at Hades, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the grove. "It feels endless," she whispered. "Like every leaf, every ripple, every subtle gesture carries memory quietly, waiting to be noticed." "Yes," Hades said softly. "Presence is its own gift. Even here, in quiet and shadow, life is held gently. Every careful step, every soft gesture, every quiet breath is reflected in the rhythm of the grove. Step by step, they moved through the grove, leaving the pool behind but carrying its gentle pulse with them. The leaves bent and swayed softly with their movements, tiny creatures drifting lazily alongside. Persephone's breathing remained slow and steady, her heartbeat aligned with the enduring rhythm of the chamber. A narrow corridor appeared at the far edge of the grove, faintly illuminated by mineral veins embedded in the walls. Persephone glanced at Hades, a quiet anticipation in her eyes. "Shall we continue?" she asked softly. He nodded, offering his hand. She took it, feeling the steady warmth of his presence alongside the gentle pulse of the grove. Step by step, they moved toward the next chamber, leaving the silent leaves behind yet carrying their quiet rhythm and enduring calm with them. Persephone stepped carefully into the next chamber, the corridor opening into a vast hall filled with softly glowing walls. The light came not from braziers or crystals, but from the very stone itself, pulsing faintly as if breathing. The walls were smooth and curved, reflecting muted colors that shifted slowly, blending into one another like the slow dance of evening light. Hades walked beside her, his presence steady and calm. "This is the gallery of quiet echoes," he said softly. "Every movement, every sound, every breath leaves a trace here. The echoes respond not with noise, but with gentle reflection." Persephone knelt to touch the floor, feeling the smooth stone beneath her fingertips. A faint vibration traveled up her arm, subtle and rhythmic, like a heartbeat synchronized with the hall itself. Tiny motes of light drifted through the air, following the curves of the walls, tracing delicate arcs that shimmered in harmony with each pulse. "It feels alive," she whispered. "Not loud or demanding, just aware." "Yes," Hades said. "Even in stillness, life responds. Every gesture, every careful movement is mirrored softly. The hall preserves attention, patience, and care." Persephone leaned closer to the wall, letting her palm hover above its smooth surface. The faint glow brightened slightly beneath her hand, tracing arcs of gentle light that reflected across the hall. Tiny translucent creatures drifted along the floor, gliding through the soft illumination. Their slow, deliberate motion seemed in perfect harmony with the subtle pulse of the stone, the light, and her own breathing. She traced small circles with her fingers, watching the echoes of light fold and stretch across the walls. Every subtle movement created a ripple, bending the glow and reflections in intricate, delicate patterns. She felt a warm, steady calm settle into her chest, the pulse of the gallery aligning perfectly with her heartbeat. Hades crouched beside her, observing her attentiveness. "The echoes of honor care," he said softly. "Even the quietest gesture leaves its trace. Patience is reflected in every shimmer, every pulse, every slow fold of light." Persephone smiled faintly, watching the delicate arcs of glowing light ripple across the hall. "It feels endless," she whispered. "Like every movement, every subtle gesture is remembered quietly, waiting for gentle notice." "Yes," Hades said. "Presence carries weight here. The hall endures because it responds patiently, deliberately. Every careful step, every soft touch, every quiet breath contributes to its rhythm." She extended a hand toward a faintly glowing arch in the far corner. The light shifted slowly beneath her fingers, bending in soft curves that mirrored her gestures. Tiny motes floated lazily through the air, drifting around her hand and fingers in a subtle dance. She leaned closer, observing the delicate interactions between motion, light, and life, marveling at how each arc and ripple carried a sense of gentle awareness. A soft breeze drifted through the chamber, cool and fragrant with the faint scent of moss and stone. Persephone closed her eyes briefly, feeling the pulse of the hall align further with her own breath. The echoes of the gallery seemed to respond to the rhythm of her inhalation and exhalation, folding the light and reflections into arcs that traced the quiet flow of her movements. Hades reached for her hand, letting her take it, and together they moved slowly along the hall. Each step sent faint vibrations through the smooth stone floor, bending the soft light and shifting the reflections in delicate patterns. The tiny creatures glided along the edges of the glow, like translucent forms weaving in arcs that mirrored the subtle pulse of the chamber. "It feels like part of me belongs here," Persephone whispered. "Like I am another ripple in the quiet rhythm of this place." "Yes," Hades said softly. "Every presence contributes. Even silence leaves its mark. Every careful gesture shapes the pulse and flow of the gallery." Persephone crouched beside a gently glowing patch on the floor. Her fingers hovered above it, and the light bent around her hand, folding softly in arcs that mirrored her movements. Tiny motes drifted above the surface, moving in harmony with the slow curves of light. She felt a calm warmth rise into her chest, steady and comforting, perfectly synchronized with the gentle pulse of the chamber. She glanced at Hades, curiosity and wonder in her eyes. "It feels like everything here remembers," she whispered. "Every echo, every fold of light, every ripple in the stone, all quietly noting what has passed." "Yes," he said softly. "Even in quiet, everything endures. Each gesture leaves a trace. Each careful breath contributes to the rhythm. Life exists in patient observation, in gentle awareness." Step by step, they continued through the gallery, the softly glowing walls bending and folding light around their movements. Tiny creatures drifted alongside, following the subtle arcs and curves of illumination. Persephone's breathing remained slow and steady, her heartbeat perfectly aligned with the enduring pulse of the hall. A narrow corridor appeared at the far end, faintly lit by embedded mineral veins that glimmered softly in the subdued glow. Persephone glanced at Hades, a quiet anticipation in her eyes. "Shall we continue?" she asked softly. He nodded, offering his hand. She took it, feeling his steady warmth alongside the calm rhythmic pulse of the gallery. Step by step, they moved toward the next chamber, leaving the quiet echoes behind, yet carrying their gentle rhythm and enduring calm with them. Persephone stepped into the last chamber, the corridor opening into a space that felt infinite. The walls curved gently, glowing faintly with pale amber light that shimmered like a soft sunset trapped in stone. The floor was smooth, cool, and faintly reflective, carrying the quiet pulse of every step she and Hades had taken together. Here, everything seemed to settle, as if the chamber itself had been waiting for them to arrive. Hades walked beside her, silent, his presence steady and calm. "This is the heart of the Underworld," he said softly. "Everything converges here: shadow, light, stillness, and motion. It is a place of reflection and belonging." Persephone knelt in the center of the chamber, letting her fingers hover above the smooth floor. The faint glow responded to her presence, bending gently around her hands. Tiny motes of light drifted lazily through the space, tracing delicate arcs that folded in and out of shadows, wrapping the chamber in soft, fluid patterns. "It feels complete," she whispered. "Like everything we've seen, every place, every movement has led here." "Yes," Hades said softly. "Every step, every gesture, every patient moment contributes to this rhythm. The chambers, the stones, the water, the leaves, they all converge here in gentle harmony." She pressed her palm lightly to the floor, feeling warmth ripple slowly up her arm. The faint light responded, stretching across the surface in flowing arcs, weaving around her fingers and pooling around her wrists. Tiny creatures drifted past, gliding in perfect harmony with the patterns of light. Persephone leaned closer, letting the calm pulse of the chamber seep into her chest, steadying her heartbeat. Hades knelt beside her, resting a hand lightly over hers. The warmth of his touch blended with the subtle glow beneath her fingers. "This is where presence becomes belonging," he said softly, "where attention and care are mirrored and preserved. Here, everything you are is acknowledged." Persephone closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the warmth of the chamber. The soft glow reflected in her lashes, and the tiny motes of light drifted lazily around her hands and hair. Every pulse of light, every gentle movement, every subtle ripple in the chamber felt perfectly attuned to her breathing, her heartbeat, and the quiet rhythm of her mind. The soft hum arose from the chamber itself, barely audible, vibrating through the floor and walls. It was not loud or urgent, but steady, patient, and comforting. Persephone felt it align with a pulse in her chest, a deep resonance that spoke not in words, but in the language of presence and stillness. Hades extended his hand, and Persephone took it, feeling his steady warmth alongside the calm pulse of the chamber. Together, they rose slowly, moving to stand in the center of the space. The faint amber glow folded around their forms, bending in gentle arcs that reflected their intertwined presence. The tiny creatures drifted around them, moving deliberately, weaving in perfect synchrony with the ripples of light. "It feels like I belong," Persephone whispered, her voice soft but certain. "Not just here, but to everything we've seen, everything we've experienced." "Yes," Hades said softly. "Every chamber, every stone, every ripple of water and leaf, they were always waiting for this moment. You belong in their rhythm, just as you belong here." Persephone extended her hands toward him, and Hades took them gently. Their warmth blended, their pulses synchronized, and for a long, quiet moment, they simply stood together, aware of the soft light, the tiny creatures, the gentle echoes of their journey. The chamber seemed to breathe with them, folding shadows and light into a seamless, calming rhythm that carried both of them. She let her head tilt slightly, resting it lightly against his shoulder. The pulse of the chamber deepened, subtle and steady, as if acknowledging the culmination of every step they had taken together. Every small gesture from their journey, the careful tracing of shadows, the gentle arcs of water, the patient presence among stones and leaves, folded quietly into the calm of this final space. Persephone's eyes traced the gentle shimmer of the chamber walls, following the delicate paths of motes and light. "It feels endless," she whispered. "Like everything we've seen lives on here, quietly, gently, in rhythm." "Yes," Hades said softly. "It endures. Every presence, every careful movement, every patient moment is preserved here. Quietly, endlessly. You are part of it now, just as it is part of you." They stood in silence, hands entwined, breathing slowly in perfect alignment with the rhythm of the chamber. The amber light flowed around them. The tiny creatures drifted lazily through the air, and the soft pulse of the floor and walls seemed to settle into an eternal calm. Persephone felt every small ripple of presence, every fold of light and shadow, every echo of quiet movement wash over her in a soothing, steady rhythm. Finally, she lifted her gaze to Hades, the soft glow reflecting in her eyes. "I understand now," she whispered. "Everything we've seen, everything we've felt, it was all leading here, to this calm, to this rhythm." "Yes," Hades said softly. "The journey matters, but the convergence is what endures. Everything we've shared, everything we've experienced, folds into this place. It carries us quietly, endlessly, without need for words or urgency." Persephone rested her head again on his shoulder, letting the warmth of his presence and the calm of the chamber seep deeply into her chest. The pulse of the underworld, the quiet rhythm of shadows and light, the gentle sway of every tiny creature, all aligned perfectly with her own heartbeat. She breathed slowly, in and out, letting the gentle, enduring rhythm carry her fully. The chamber seemed to respond in perfect harmony, the light bending softly around them, the motes drifting in lazy arcs, the subtle echoes of every chamber they had traversed converging here. Persephone felt a profound sense of belonging, calm, and completion, a quiet understanding that the rhythm of the underworld, the patience of Hades, and the gentle persistence of life itself had always been waiting for this alignment. Step by step, even as they moved slightly within the chamber, the pulse and rhythm followed, folding them into a quiet, endless embrace. Persephone let herself sink fully into it, the warmth, the light, and the patient pulse carrying her gently, endlessly, into calm, quiet belonging. And there, in the soft amber glow with Hades at her side, she felt the final, gentle understanding of the underworld. That presence, patience, and quiet attention are the truest form of life, folding all that is, all that was, and all that will be into gentle, enduring calm.